Chapter 31. The Vanir Gods. Inside Valasholf, seated upon the highest divine throne, Thelose watched his foolish younger brother with some amusement. The image of Odin standing eagerly at the palace gates stirred a dry, magnetic voice in Thelose's mind. Spring has arrived. Life awakens. It's mating season once again. The forests are thick with the scent of hormones. And then, Odin's storyline simply stopped progressing. Each goddess offered Odin polite thanks for his welcome, but not one entered the hall at his side. Not even Frigg, his number one hope, spared him a single proper glance. All Thelose could see written on his brother's forehead was one big, tragic character, commiserable. Honestly, it wasn't as if Odin had done anything wrong. But life was cruel like that. The firstborn inherits. The strongest takes all. The world doesn't remember the runner-up, it remembers the champion. And in a divine family, the second son has it rough, especially when the first is a god king, whose strength dwarfs all others. The palace was vibrant with celebration. Goddesses competed to offer wine, perform, and show off their talents to Thelose. Yet Odin felt like an outsider, lost in a party that clearly wasn't meant for him. Especially when he saw Frigg, who barely smiled at him earlier, now dancing gracefully for Thelose, proudly showing off her divine beauty. Odin felt like he'd been stabbed. And then Thelose stood, and announced in full view of the gathered deities. Beautiful goddesses, I mean no offense, but the Aesir were built on strength. Our enemies draw near, and our glory must not be tarnished. I am willing to take one of you as my queen. But only if you can bear a child stronger than Thor. It was a simple, brutal, and very Aesir condition. The frost giants were endless, their threat ever present. Naturally, the strongest warrior was the god king Thelose. And his successor had to be stronger still. If anyone objected to his having a child with the frost giantess Jor and birthing Thor, then prove him wrong, give birth to someone stronger. Far from discouraging the gathered goddesses, the challenge sparked their competitive fire. God King. That title is worth fighting for. They were all goddesses, why should anyone get the queen's seat without a fight? But, this requirement was a little extreme. Even Frigg, so confident in her allure, was stunned. For the first time in her life, her beauty hadn't sealed the deal. While she hesitated, Gilda, the goddess of dawn and morning light, had already made up her mind and rushed forward, offering Thelose all her passion and loyalty. Among the crowd, only the calm and quiet Sif, goddess of harvest and earth, chose to withdraw. She'd quietly set her sights on the soon-to-be 18-year-old Thor. As for Frigg, she wavered. At that moment, Odin couldn't hold back any longer. He stepped up beside her and said gently, "Beautiful goddess Frigg, my palace is not far. If you're tired, perhaps you'd like to rest there for a while." "Your palace?" Frigg arched an eyebrow. "The one with the bronze walls?" Her eyes made no attempt to hide her disdain. Odin hesitated. "Yes." Frigg's expression turned cold. "Forgive me. I don't think I'm any less than the other goddesses here. Even if I lose, I'd rather cry in the golden palace than smile in a bronze one." She was a devout hedonist. No matter how shiny bronze might appear from afar, bronze is still bronze. To her, the god king's brother was not the god king. She made her intentions very clear. "I came to be queen. I don't care who the god king is." Odin's face went pale. He staggered away, gulped down wine after wine, until the alcohol dulled the ache in his chest. Leaning drunkenly on Loki's shoulder, he mumbled, "Loki, do you think I'm useless? I can't do anything as well as my brother." Loki, usually quick-witted, found himself speechless for once. "Even without comparing your birth order, your brother is the strongest. Is there nothing I can do to prove myself?" Loki hesitated. "Apply to be the king of Jotunheim. Take command there." It was a valid path. Jotunheim still had many giants loyal to the Aesir, and rogue frost giants constantly sprang up seeking revenge. Holding the front there would surely earn Odin some recognition. But Odin shook his head. "Not enough. Then I think you'll have to wait," Loki whispered. "I have a feeling His Majesty is preparing for war. A big one." "War?" Odin's eyes suddenly lit up. He clenched his fists. "Yes. In war, I'll prove I deserve to stand as an equal. I'll make our parents, and every goddess, see me differently." That night, Odin left the Palace of Joy with his head held high, and began honing his spear, Gingnir. 1 year later, the seemingly barren goddesses finally bore fruit. 2 new Aesir gods were born, both of purer lineage, without a trace of frost giant blood. One of them was the famed Heimdall. Thelose sighed as he looked upon the boy. After years of being misled by Marvel, he could hardly believe his eyes. No dreadlocks. No black skin. Just a snow-white warrior with chiseled features and a massive golden tooth, known by many as the White Aesir. His eyes could see for 300 miles, and his ears could hear across entire realms. When he came of age, the Lows planned to put him on Bifrost duty, finally letting poor Jor the bow god off the hook. The second child was Balder, god of light, handsome, innocent, always wearing a radiant smile that made the goddesses absolutely adore him. Both were fine boys, with one small problem. They weren't stronger than Thor, Tyr, or Vidar. Heimdall, born of Gilda, might one day catch up. Balder. His combat abilities weren't even in the same league. Frigg nearly blacked out when she realized this, and vowed to work harder. As for Bor and Bestla, their greatest relief came when Odin finally got it together. He snuck down to the mortal realm and seduced a woman named Rindr, who later gave birth to a son, Vali. Though they were slightly disappointed that their second son couldn't woo a goddess, they were at least happy he'd started building a legacy of his own. 10 years later, as always, the great cow Aumbla stirred again. This time, the tremor was massive. With a single lick, an entire carriage-sized chunk of glacier caved in, triggering a domino effect. Booming collapses followed in quick succession. Within mere breaths, a massive ice canyon had formed. From the valley below, countless colossal figures opened their glowing eyes. As thousands of tons of ancient ice crashed from their bodies, beams of seven-colored light shot into the sky. This event was so powerful that the Lows didn't need Jor's report. Sitting on his throne in the Golden Palace, he felt it through the world's will itself, an unmistakable ripple. He stood. Oh, finally here, are you? Vanir gods, you've kept me waiting. Vanir gods, you've kept me waiting. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 32. The bell tolls. The Lows felt a long-lost sense of excitement. After slaying Ymir, that rush, that thrill of conquest and destiny, it had grown quiet. That's life, isn't it? When you're single, you crave a woman. Once you have one, you start dreaming of a harem. Eventually, you want those women to be goddesses, worthy, divine companions. Becoming a god king should have been the pinnacle of any transmigrator's dream. With his intelligence, governing the 9 realms was nothing more than a side hobby. He could have just lazed around in divine beauty, basking in adoration. But not a day went by that he forgot. He was destined to face Ragnarok, the world-ending cataclysm. Fighting against such a world-level fate, that was what made the divine game truly thrilling. Ever since arriving in this world, even after he prematurely removed Searcher from the equation, the Lows had more or less been following Odin's script. He fathered the key children at the right times, watching how fate stubbornly snapped events back into line. If there was any real place he could start breaking the pattern, it was with the Vanir gods. In the Edda, the Aesir could not defeat the Vanir, and so they were forced into co-rulership. That uneasy alliance planted the seeds of countless future conflicts. But just because the world needs the Vanir doesn't mean it needs to share power with them. The Lows' fingers lingered on the soft skin of the goddesses beside him. Frigg and Gilda flinched as his grip unknowingly tightened, not enough to harm, but just enough to sting. He didn't apologize. He simply patted their supple forms, motioning them to retreat a little. Then, his voice, majestic and mighty, rolled through the Golden Palace, echoing off the gilded walls with divine thunder. Sound the alarm, first level alert. It was a declaration. He wanted war. A challenge worthy of the Aesir's glory. A conquest worthy of a god king. Dong, dong, dong. The bell tolled through all of Asgard. Its deep peals pierced the dawn skies, breaking through the fading night as the rising sun bathed the Golden Palace in burning light. The clouds glowed red and orange, as though a giant had lifted a burning torch over the world. The toll reached every corner of the realm. Mortals turned their heads toward the shining palace at the heart of the sky, instinctively sensing something monumental had begun. Giants paused their tasks. Gods halted their leisure. They had all been told. When enemies approach, the bell will ring. A long ring meant alert. A short ring meant attack. But the truth was, no one had ever heard it before. Even when 100 frost giants attacked, the bell had remained silent. So what was happening this time? Some troops were sluggish, others undisciplined. But one unit responded instantly. Like the wind, they assembled the moment the first toll echoed. From their barracks, the Valkyries surged out in a cloud of mist. By the time they landed, they were already armored, winged white helmets, blood-red battle uniforms, radiant divine spears and golden shields in hand, astride powerful white Pegasi. Only 16 in number, but their arrival felt like a legion of thousands. They were, of course, the elite warrior maidens Odin had prepared in the mythos for Ragnarok. This time, the Lows had called them early. Each Valkyrie was either a mortal princess the Lows had handpicked or a goddess awakened from the ice. They wasted no time, galloping straight toward the palace like streaks of divine light, drawing gazes like the aurora borealis. Close behind came Bor, Odin, Willi, Thor, and Loki, all fully armored. Then came the goddesses. Then came the giants loyal to Asgard. Bor, as always, voiced the question on everyone's mind. What's happening? The Lows, clad in full golden armor, sat tall upon the throne. His gaze swept across the gathered gods and giants, then pierced space itself, reaching westward, toward the middle realms. His voice, like an immovable decree, filled the hall. A force equal to the Aesir has awakened from the glaciers. The Vanir gods have returned. And they will challenge our dominion. In that moment, every male deity instinctively gripped their weapon. Every goddess clenched her fists, excitement and fear stirring deep within them. In times of peace, they'd scoffed and joked that the male gods were all bark and no bite. But now was Judgment Day. Would the Aesir rise again in glory? Or would some evil new faction dare to stand as equals? The answer would soon be revealed. Bor was the first to kneel, slamming his right fist over his chest with a heavy thud. God King, we await your command. No fathers or sons, only leaders and followers. Odin stepped forward after him, voice booming. If war comes, I volunteer as the vanguard. Thor stomped up beside him, towering taller than Odin by half a head. No, uncle, you've already proven your courage. Let me lead the charge this time. Behind him, Tyr, Vidar, and Balder also stepped up. Odin could only sigh. Even his own nephews were stronger than he was. More gods and giants followed suit, pledging loyalty with fists to their chests. But the Lows raised his hand. No rush. Let's wait for Jor to report back first. In the meantime, Odin, go discipline the undisciplined mortal troops. Yes, your majesty. Tyr, Vidar, Balder, you three form patrol squads. 3 shifts, rotating. Yes, your majesty. Bor on standby. Thor, your palace guard. Every order clear and precise, like pieces in a grand war game, each moving into place. Half a day later, Jor finally returned. As expected, the Vanir had awakened. Kneeling at the steps of the throne, he reported in a solemn voice. Your Majesty, I have confirmed the awakening of 36 unknown deities. Of them, 35 have traveled west to the middle realm of Vanaheim. However, Jor bowed his head further. One of them has gone missing. My men and I lost track of them. The hall fell silent, and the Lows, he narrowed his eyes. So, the game begins. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 33. The uninvited guest. Missing. The Lows waved his hand casually at Jor's report. No matter. You've done well watching over the glaciers for so many years. You've earned your rest. Return now and stand watch over Bifrost with Heimdall. Yes, your majesty. Jor exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Truth be told, apart from Thalos and his fellow third-generation Aesir, born during the Eternal Night, no one truly liked Jotunheim. That frozen wasteland was desolate, bitter, and unbearable. Jor considered himself lucky. After being beaten to a pulp by young Thor for challenging the God King, he thought for sure he'd been marked. But apparently, Thalos was merciful. Thank the stars. Half a day earlier, Vanaheim. A host of gods, as tall and imposing as the Aesir, stood on the shores of a radiant coastline. Before them stretched an endless expanse of sapphire blue sea, its horizon melting into the sky, with only a faint breeze teasing the warmth of the summer sun. Everything seemed perfect. Njord, the leader of the Vanir gods, was pleased. He raised one hand, and the crashing surf stilled instantly. The tide receded into itself and then reshaped into a massive vessel of water, buoying the entire pantheon as it sailed deeper into the sea. Eventually, they reached a mid-ocean island roughly 40 square kilometers in size. Golden sands sloped gently into crystal waters, and beneath the waves lay rich veins of water elementals, exactly what Njord desired. With a simple gesture, ocean currents roared to life. Massive stones emerged from the seafloor, lifted by unseen hands of water. Under his control, they came together like puzzle pieces, swiftly erecting a towering temple of divine grandeur. 12 black stone pillars stood tall at the temple's front. Coral, algae, and glimmering veins of water magic wrapped around them like living patterns. As Njord poured his divine power into the structure, it rose higher and higher. By noon, the temple reached nearly 100 meters tall, its silhouette shining against the backdrop of a blazing sunset. The Vanir gods, every one of them, stood proud and satisfied. But then, the light dimmed. If they were mere mortals, their vision would have stopped at the clouds. But they were gods. They saw it clearly. A massive shadow stretched across the sky, casting darkness from the east all the way to their island. It wasn't a storm. It was a structure. A rainbow bridge. It arched across the heavens, starting from the distant east and vanishing into the floating landmass that hovered far above them, a land more majestic and radiant than any they had ever seen. Njord's expression darkened. A tether of divine color anchored heaven and earth together, but to what end? To him, it felt like chains, chains binding the ocean and the sky, his ocean and sky, to a realm not his own. Then, he realized, the island and sea they stood upon bore another god's divine laws. Gullveig, a sultry, tattooed goddess stepped forward, sword in hand. Her body was wrapped in black markings, her figure curvaceous and deadly. I'm here. I sense another pantheon claiming this world, Njord said coldly. Go have a discussion with them. Ask if their gods are still worthy of worship. His words sounded polite. They weren't. The moment mortal belief shifted, the balance of divine power would follow. One would rise. One would fall. Gods, no matter how you dressed them up, still followed the rules of the old wild ways. Gullveig cackled softly. Oh, I'll make sure they understand how great the Vanir truly are. Laughing, she transformed into a black mist and shot toward the magnificent arc of color cutting across the sky. At Bifrost, the rainbow bridge. Standing guard, Heimdall kept his eyes wide open. Ever since the alert had been issued, he'd been on high alert. Beside him, Jor was quietly checking the feathers of his arrows, ensuring every shaft was straight, every fletching clean. Heimdall's vigilance had never been in vain. Suddenly, he saw it. Footprints. Barely visible, a string of delicate depressions began to appear on the divine roadway that connected Bifrost to the sacred path. The marks were faint, just the barest shift of sand and dust. No mortal could have noticed. But Heimdall's senses were divine. Who goes there? Heimdall bellowed. Jor's reflexes kicked in instantly. 2 arrows flew. One arrow tore through the air with a sonic boom, tearing open the sky like a crack of thunder. The second was silent, shadowing the first like a twin, poised to strike from the dark. But they missed. The intruder had turned into mist, slipping between the arrows with supernatural grace. She's faster than we are, Heimdall growled. I'll sound the horn. You chase. Understood. They split in an instant. Heimdall drove his sword bolt steel into the ground and blew his divine horn. W-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O-O. The alarm echoed through the realm, deep and sonorous. No longer a warning. It was the signal of invasion. Seconds later, the alarm bells joined in. Asgard mobilized. Fast. But the enemy was faster. Like a streak of smoke, the black mist surged past the Valkyries guarding the gates of the Golden Palace. It blew open the 100-meter doors with ease. And there she stood, a 5-meter-tall woman, covered in black tattoos. Golden headband, open-slit battle garb, long legs encased in black thigh-high boots. Gullveig. She planted her sinister black longsword into the red carpet at the center of the throne room, the blade's hilt carved with a grinning skull. Her voice oozed challenge. So, this is how the Aesir treat their guests. Seated atop his throne, Tholos rested his chin on his right hand. He gently waved his left, halting Thor and the other gods who were ready to explode. His voice was calm, cold. To our friends, we offer wine. To our enemies, we offer blades. It wasn't empty talk. Gullveig saw it. To her left stood a massive barrel of mead, filling the air with rich aroma. To her right, 8 unsheathed divine swords, hovering in midair, all pointed at her. But she didn't flinch. She laughed. I am Gullveig, emissary of Lord Njord. I've come to ask, does the Aesir pantheon truly deserve its throne? Insolence. The response. A lance of light, sharp enough to pierce the stars, shot toward her like divine wrath. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 34. The Legendary Undying Queen. By rights, Odin should not have made a move. Declaring war against an equal-level divine race was a privilege reserved for the God King. But Odin couldn't endure it. None of the gods or giants present could. Gullveig's very first words had fundamentally challenged the legitimacy of the Aesir's rule, insulting the entire Aesir pantheon. That in itself was a declaration of war. In this era, only recently removed from barbarism, there was no such concept as, don't kill the envoy. People handled things in a straightforward and brutal manner. Odin's action wasn't wrong. There was no doubt that when he hurled Gingnir, what he unleashed was a world-shaking, breathtaking strike. The thrown divine spear looked like a morning star streaking through the heavens, its radiance easily outshining the golden walls behind it. It tore through the void, aimed straight for Gullveig's heart. The Vanir goddess on the opposite side did try to dodge. She couldn't. There was simply no way to dodge. Her field of vision suddenly and subtly shifted, reality seeming to stutter. One moment, the gleam of the spear was still 50 meters away, and in the next, it was already at her chest. That jarring perceptual split caused her to panic slightly. Then, a horrific bloody hole appeared in her chest. It wasn't until Gingnir traced a grand arc through the air and flew back into Odin's hand that Gullveig finally saw clearly how Odin had attacked. And then, she fell. Die, you blasphemous bitch. Odin spat bitterly at the end. Having spoken, Odin turned with pride, with the unshakable aura of a true male god who never looks back at the explosion, striding back toward his divine throne. Just then, a mocking chuckle, kkkk, rang out behind him. Odin froze as if under a binding spell. His entire body tensed, and even his eyes filled with blood. His bull-like neck strained as he turned his head. Not just him, the entire hall of gods and giants stared in stunned disbelief as Gullveig slowly rose from the ground with an eerie, unnatural presence. So this is the might of the Aesir. What a joke, she said flippantly. Her voice dripped with contempt, as if slapping Odin's pale face repeatedly with invisible hands. Next to him, the ever-temperamental Thor lost it. He grabbed Mjolnir and charged forward. Just then, Thalos's unhurried voice rang out. Thor, halt. Thor stopped dead in his tracks, turning back in frustration to cast a confused look at his father, Thalos. Not just him, the gods and giants in the hall were all bewildered. Had the God King gone soft? Was he really conceding? Then how could he still sit proudly on the sacred throne of the God King? Several Aesir goddesses openly showed their disappointment. Gullveig laughed harder, even more brazenly. Ah, yes, now that's more like it. A swirl of black mist rushed toward the wicked goddess. As the mist churned, the horrific hole in her chest vanished completely. The gods gasped in unison. What kind of devilry was this? Gullveig's taunting became completely unrestrained. You muscle-brained barbaric idiots actually dare call yourselves gods. Hand over control of the Ginnungagap world, and His Majesty our glorious God King Njord might grant you a little corner of land where you can shut yourselves in and play your little divine games. Such humiliation. How could the gods and giants endure it? Their fists had long since clenched into iron. Just then, Thalos spoke slowly. My foolish brother, why do you still never learn to observe your enemy before striking? Odin's neck shrank back on the spot. He was so miserable. He'd painstakingly forged a divine spear, and yet it failed in its first battle, and now he had to be scolded by his big brother. Thalos then turned sharply and berated Thor. You're an idiot too. Odin already failed, and you still think using the same method will work. Step back. Watch and learn. Gullveig burst into crazed laughter. Ha ha ha. So the so-called Supreme God King of the Aesir is finally making a move. Come on, I'm right here. Let's see if you can kill me. The wicked, wild goddess spread her arms wide. The hole in her clothes from Gingnir's strike still hadn't been mended, revealing a tattooed chest. In the hall, nearly everyone aligned with the Aesir was seething with rage. If not for the fact that the God King Thalos still looked calm and confident, they might have exploded from fury. To deal with you, do I even need to act personally? This time, Thalos let out a mocking laugh. Brunhilde, take my divine sword and show this trickster of a so-called goddess the true might of the Aesir. Yes, Valkyrie Brunhilde stepped forth at once. She was not of divine blood. In this life, she was merely the daughter of a mortal king in the lower realms. But she had earned Thalos's great favor and thus held the title of Valkyrie. As a mortal, her stature was tiny compared to the gods. At 1.79 meters tall, she couldn't even reach most gods' waists, let alone the towering giants, who stood more than 10 meters tall. If Gullveig's challenge had been a disgrace to the Aesir gods, then Thalos now sending out Brunhilde was, in a way, a counter-disgrace to the Vanir gods. If Brunhilde succeeded, Odin's failure would be instantly wiped clean. If this mortal woman failed, then Thalos would be guilty of overconfidence. Even if he later made up for it somehow, his prestige would take a heavy blow. But entrusting the God King's reputation to a mortal woman, was that appropriate? Was the so-called Valkyrie really just an ornamental name, as rumors said? The gods didn't know. Brunhilde herself didn't know. She only knew to grip the divine sword that had descended from the heavens and, without hesitation, launch an attack at the opposing goddess, who stood more than twice her height. Out of extreme provocation toward the Aesir, Gullveig didn't dodge at all. The divine sword pierced straight into her abdomen from below. Apologies, but due to Brunhilde's height and the length of the sword of Niflheim, that was the optimal calculated angle. Theoretically, piercing through the abdomen could also strike the heart and lungs. In, out, Brunhilde's movements were smooth and precise. At once, the seductive goddess before her was shrouded in black mist, and all eyes watched as cold fog seeped into her body through the wound. A second later, Gullveig's scream of agony shook the heavens. No, what's happening? What did you do? She stared at Thelose on the divine throne with incredulity, her eyes filled with disbelief. She wanted to spew more venomous mockery, but when she opened her mouth again, she was horrified to find that her lips, throat, lungs, stomach, intestines, and every orifice were filled with icy mist. When her divine body knelt uncontrollably toward the throne, the hall erupted in shock. At the corner of Thelose's mouth curled a charming smile. Hey, no wonder she was called the legendary Undying Queen. In the epic Edda, someone even Odin and Thor couldn't kill after 3 tries. Too bad. True damage is the most real damage in this world. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 35. The Aesir's Return Gift. Thelose had long prepared for this. He specifically designed his Sword of the Nine Realms with true damage in mind, for the express purpose of countering the Aesir's greatest rivals in this world, the Vanir. The Aesir gods appeared incredibly powerful, but most of them had achieved godhood through physical ascension. Especially after their bloodline mingled with that of the giants, their abilities relied almost entirely on brute force. This was most evident in Thor. Though their physical forms were mighty beyond compare, the problem arose when enemies refused to face them head-on, instead harassing them with nimble formations and magical attacks. Most Aesir had no answer for such tactics. In the epic Edda, many of the Aesir whose bodies weren't tough enough were slowly bled dry and worn down by the Vanir, who ultimately managed to kill quite a few. Conversely, Vanir gods lacked physical endurance. Once their tricks were broken, they were eliminated instantly. The result was that the two sides ground each other down in a prolonged war of attrition, depleting all their strength and eventually being forced into an uneasy truce. Now, Gullveig kneeling had a huge impact. If things had gone as in the epics, Odin and Thor failing 3 times to kill the dark sorceress Gullveig, the Aesir would have lost morale before the battle even began, their effective strength slashed by 30% at the start. But now, so what if Odin lost face? Was this, foolish little brother, as the God King was fond of calling him, not already infamous for losing face time and again? An unreliable divine brother, a reliable God King, and a divine son with room to grow, that was enough. The moment the tattooed goddess knelt, the temple erupted with thunderous cheers. Ha ha ha, you wicked witch. Did you really think your tricks would work? Our Lord didn't even need to act himself, just one mortal defeated you. Bet you regret it now. Ha 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 ha. The giants were the loudest, with the shouting interspersed by shrill cries of excitement from many goddesses. Everything had happened so fast that when Ullr the bow god returned, he was stunned to see the enemy already on her knees. Did I miss something? Ullr asked sheepishly. No, not at all. The best part is just beginning. Loki's face was flushed with excitement. Gullveig's bizarre magic had deeply stirred his imagination. He felt he could invent even more cunning tricks. Down at the steps below the throne, Gullveig's body convulsed violently. She was furious, struggling to rise and unleash dark magic against the barbaric Aesir god king who had done whatever it was to her. The sad truth was, she couldn't. That cold fog inside her was wreaking havoc, transforming into dozens of hand-sized palms that were physically gouging her heart and lungs. Not fatal, but agony beyond belief. The internal disruption of her organs was driving her to the brink of collapse. Tears, snot, and sweat streamed uncontrollably from every orifice, leaving her looking like someone freshly dragged from a swamp, utterly wretched. What did you do to me? She choked, her voice twisted with fear, strange white mist spilling from her mouth as she stared at Thelose. Thelose hadn't changed his posture since the moment she entered the hall. Still resting his chin on one hand, he smiled enigmatically. Nothing much. I just let you experience a little of the world's reality. Reality, what does that mean? Thelose didn't answer. Instead, he gave an order. Valkyries, drag her away and lock her in the sky prison. Leave that sword in her. Though frankly, pulling it out wouldn't change a thing. Yes. The chosen mortal maidens, ecstatic to carry out the God King's command, responded in unison. Compared to the gods, they lacked strength. So it took the combined effort of several of them to drag the nearly 5-meter-tall Gullveig out of the hall like a dead dog. Yet this only reinforced the overwhelming image of mortals defeating a true god. The uproar in the hall didn't quiet down. In fact, the clamor grew even louder. Ha ha ha, this is the Vanir. Can't even measure up to mortals, what a joke. Look at her pathetic state. Her head's not even worthy of hanging on the Rainbow Bridge. With Gullveig dragged away, Odin, still feeling bitter, stepped forward and bowed deeply. My apologies, Your Majesty. I was too reckless just now. Forgive me, Father. So was I. Thor followed suit, admitting fault. Tholos waved a hand. Listen, both of you. A commander must never act on impulse. Remember that. Cultivate your temperaments properly. Yes. The two gods answered in unison. At that moment, Bor stepped forward. Then, how shall we respond to the Vanir's declaration of war? With just one sentence from Bor, the giants stirred immediately. They raised all manner of weapons high into the air, their deep roars nearly tearing the roof off the Golden Palace. Kill all their male gods. Take all their female gods. Oh. Thalos's lips twitched slightly. Truly, this was the god system once worshipped by Vikings, so gloriously straightforward. But these dumb giants didn't stand a chance against the Vanir. In the epics, they were a drag on the Aesir during the war. Still, in recent years, several renowned giants had pledged loyalty, Fabuti and Laufey, the married couple who joined early on, as well as the giant Tiaz and the giantess Skadi. Giants respected strength and had straightforward personalities. On the other hand, with the enemy's strength still unknown, it wouldn't be ideal to keep these giants, who had pledged themselves to the Aesir, out of the fight entirely. Thalos had an idea. Giants, I hear your thirst for battle. Indeed, our race must respond. But sending you into Vanaheim, surrounded by ocean, would be a waste of your true strength. So I propose a better way to showcase your valor and might. What is it? Tiaz asked eagerly. The gods will continue preparing for war. Giants, come with me. Before long, Thalos led 100 giants to the westernmost cliff of the floating continent of Asgard and pointed down at the clearly visible landmass of Vanaheim below. The two continents weren't that far apart, maybe 100 kilometers at most. Both landmasses were large, but at this distance, everyone could clearly see the small island surrounded by blue ocean where the Vanir resided. See that island? That's where the lowly trash who claim they should rule the world of Ginnungagap live. Thalos's declaration triggered a thunderous response from the giants. We see it. All you need to do is strap on some safety harnesses, and start hurling boulders at the skulls of those bastards down there. Can you do that? We can do it. The giants were even more fired up. Truth be told, facing enemies who were full of trickery and seemingly unkillable had made them hesitant. But raw power, that was their specialty. So the giants fastened massive safety ropes made from thick braided vines around their waists, then lifted boulders weighing 10 tons or more and hurled them down toward Vanaheim with all their might. It was a man-made meteor shower. And giants were technically people. No problem there. As the sky darkened under the rain of stones and the world trembled with their impact, Thalos smiled and declared. Vanir gods, please accept this return gift. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 36. The man-made meteor shower. In the Sibylline prophecies, the war between the Aesir and the Vanir is described as follows. This was the first grand-scale and brutally tragic war since the dawn of creation. The warriors of both divine races fought fearlessly on the battlefield, and every god's weapon was stained with the enemy's blood. Because the two sides were evenly matched, the war dragged on for many years, with both pantheons suffering enormous losses. From Thalos's perspective, the blame for the Aesir's failure to overcome the Vanir in that epic still fell on Odin. The Aesir had the home field advantage, and yet a group of not particularly powerful newcomers managed to battle them to a standstill. That, in itself, was the ultimate defeat. It all stemmed from one root problem. When the three brothers of the Aesir reshaped the world, they had grown sick of cold and eternal night, and so simply and violently dumped all the elements they didn't want into other realms. As a result, the Aesir, perpetually basking in sunlight, suffered from a kind of magical climate shock whenever they ventured out. No matter which realm they fought in, they always felt like they were at a disadvantage. So why had Njord sent the legendary Undying Queen, Gullveig, to provoke the Aesir? For one, the Vanir were genuinely confident, and had a taste for courting death. 2. It was entirely possible Njord intended to bait the Aesir into launching an invasion, only to surround and annihilate them on his home turf. Think about it. With the Rainbow Bridge at their disposal, Odin might descend onto the Vanir's island with his war band, full of righteous fury, to demand justice, only to realize too late. Njord is the god of the sea. He could summon enormous tidal waves with ease and unleash omnidirectional, full coverage strikes on the airborne troops of the Aesir. And just when Odin and Thor had failed 3 times to kill Gullveig, utterly losing face, the Aesir's morale would be shaky. They would be compelled to attack anyway, or else they wouldn't be able to suppress internal dissent and fractures within their ranks. That was the true fatal point. Tholos suspected that in the epic, Odin had been forced into that very trap, step by step, by Njord. But this lifetime was different. Tholos's reshaping of the world had been more thorough, more balanced. He had personally lifted the Aesir out of their primitive barbarism. After taking down Gullveig, his position was rock solid. There was no pressure, no need to fall for any goad or rush to prove himself. So then, behold, the meteor shower, not long after, in Vanaheim. The arrival of the Vanir gods had quickly drawn the attention of mortals trying to make a living in this world. They were thrilled that sea deities had finally appeared in the realm. At the same time, a second wave of Vanir deities awakened and rushed to Nord's side. This development gave Njord even greater confidence. As he looked up at the nearly floating landmass of Asgard in the sky, Njord felt a surge of disgust for the Aesir gods who dwelled in that higher place. Suddenly, a strange sound rang out from the heavens. What's that sound? It wasn't just the mortals helping to build the divine temples who were confused. Even the Vanir gods were glancing around in bewilderment, searching for the source. That sound quickly morphed into a deafening blast. On the island, on nearby fishing boats, almost everyone saw it. A massive boulder tearing through the sky, displacing air as it plummeted into the ocean on the eastern side of the island. Watch out! Freyr, the Vanir god near the shore, instinctively shouted. With a terrifying howling wind, the boulder crashed down near a ferry carrying believers to the island. Boom! It was a slightly off-target, but not completely off-target, throw. The impact point was less than 20 meters from the boat's hull. The sailors aboard hadn't even realized what was happening when a towering wave, laced with razor-sharp stone shrapnel, slammed into them. The roaring of the waves, the crashing impact, and the screaming of the crowd lasted who knew how long. When one unfortunate sailor crawled back onto the deck, his face stung sharply. Instinctively reaching up, he felt his own teeth where his cheek should have been. Ah! He joined the chorus of screams. He was one of the unluckier ones. Most passengers aboard the simple, open, wide-decked wooden vessel suffered only minor to moderate cuts from flying debris, not life-threatening, though they bled a lot. What truly struck fear was the beach. Several shattered boulders now stood embedded in the once calm, flat sands, their brutal presence utterly out of place against the peaceful shoreline. Watch out! More incoming! Someone shouted. Everyone looked up in horror and saw more boulders, weighing hundreds of tons, hurtling down from the sky. It was as if the heavens themselves were punishing them, raining down a storm of destruction. Njord, shocked and pale, quickly thrust out his hand. With a surge of divine power, the previously calm ocean exploded into motion. A towering 30-meter wave surged upward, perfectly timed to shield the harbor and the faithful gathered on the docks. The wave flipped like a human performing a front somersault. Thousands of tons of water roared over the believers' heads, colliding with the incoming stone. From behind the massive wall of water, people heard only dull, muffled thuds. That was the sound of the boulder hitting the wave, breaking apart and slowing on impact. Filtered through the water, it didn't even sound real. The huge wave absorbed the shrapnel and carried it into the sea's depths. Praise Lord Njord! The ignorant faithful screamed, hailing it as a divine miracle as they fell to their knees in worship. Only Njord himself wore a face dark as iron, glaring up toward the sky. With the second massive boulder crashing down, the clouds above had long since been shredded apart, revealing clearly the source, more immense, meteors, streaking through the heavens, trailing long tails of flame as they hurtled from east to west, straight for the island. Even if Njord had been as dumb as Billy, he would have understood by now, this was no natural meteor shower. This was the Aesir's revenge. Through his expanded divine perception, Njord already vaguely grasped that these 10-ton boulders were being hurled directly from Asgard. The awe-inspiring noise of their descent triggered widespread panic among the mortals. Njord ceased his costly tidal defenses. With a soft murmur, dozens of swirling waterspouts rose from the sea's surface, serpentine water formations, not actual sea serpents, but elementally formed constructs mimicking their shape. They coiled and twisted upward, shooting jets of water high into the sky, perfectly aimed at intercepting the falling rocks. More boulders fell, but none fared any better than the first. Each was struck midair by water bullets that acted like interceptor missiles, shattering the stones into fragments, which then rained down into the sea in a terrifying downpour. The mortals continued to glorify their god's majesty. But no one noticed that Nord's expression had gone pitch black, as dark as the bottom of a pot. These stone missiles showed no signs of stopping. Eventually, both mortals and Vanir gods became numb to it. It no longer felt like boulders were being intercepted, more like snow drifting lazily down, indifferent to the concept of danger. But was that really the case? High above, Thelose smiled as he watched the scene unfold. Exchanging the giant's brute strength for Nord's divine power, is there any deal more profitable than this? Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 37. The Secret of the Legendary Undying Queen. Getting giants to hurl boulders and actually hit a specific person or god was nearly impossible. But tossing stones onto an island just 100 kilometers below and dozens of square kilometers wide, if you throw enough, you're bound to hit something. It was just a matter of probability. The more you throw, the better your chances. And that disgusted Njord to no end. As the saying goes, high ground hits low, beating up kids. The giants, with their endless brute strength, could even take turns in 3 shifts. The stones were already prepared. Thelose had set this up at the very start of reshaping the world. He didn't even need to send giants down to gather rocks. Some giants had asked, is this really effective? Thelose simply pointed to the occasional pillar-like beams of light shooting up from the ocean. That's the enemy's helpless counterattack, he told them. The giants took a closer look and laughed harder, delighted as they kept working. Brunhilde. Present, my lord. Prepare fine wine and roasted meat for our giant brothers. And get some campaign beds ready, too. Yes. The Valkyrie answered with joy. The giants were thrilled. The only one looking a little out of place was Odin, still smarting from his humiliation. But this time, he didn't act rashly. He simply edged over and asked, Big brother, can we actually defeat the Vanir with just this? No, Thelose shook his head. But at the very least, we can flush those rats out of their sewers. Rats. Sewers. The metaphor was too accurate. The other gods grew excited. Big brother, is there something I can do? You really want to contribute? Thelose gave Odin a sidelong glance. Of course. Odin pounded his chest. Then go help guard the Rainbow Bridge. Don't worry, big brother, I won't let a single Vanir traitor set foot in Asgard. No, this time, I want you to lose. And lose in a way that looks like a hard-fought defeat. Huh, not just Odin. Everyone nearby looked completely baffled. Thelose smirked. Gullveig fell into our hands. Do you think those rats in the sewers dare come charging into Asgard all at once? If we don't give them some sweet wine first, how could they ever work up the courage to come alone? If you drive back their vanguard too easily, it'll only make them more afraid to move. That strategy left these so-called gods, who could just as easily be described as divine-level barbarians, absolutely dumbfounded. They didn't quite understand why they were fighting like this, but they instinctively felt their god-king was brilliant. They all voiced admiration. Your Majesty is wise beyond measure. Thelose waved a hand dismissively. Putting on airs in front of these muscle-for-brains gods wasn't particularly satisfying. Odin flushed slightly and muttered, so, how do I fake losing? Just fight as hard as you can. If you can't win, fall back. That's all. You're allowed to lose all the buildings in District 1 of the Rainbow Bridge area. We'll evacuate the mortal believers in advance, leave only the mortal guard units. Oh, okay, Odin accepted, though his heart still grumbled. Big brother, what are you saying? Are you implying I can't beat them? What Odin didn't know was, Thelose actually was thinking that. Not because he looked down on Odin. But if you reviewed the Edda, Odin's clean and decisive victories were incredibly rare. His most impressive feat was defeating the progenitor of the frost giants, Ymir. But that didn't include the Vanir. If Odin could have handled Njord, he wouldn't have resorted to tricks during the hostage exchange later. Odin might have looked mighty, but in battle, his track record was famously poor. Thelose saw right through this foolish little brother. So Odin was sent to join Heimdall, drinking cold wind while guarding the gates. The second line of defense was handed to Bor. Thelose turned away with Thor and left. Before long, at the Sky Prison. The scene was a bit odd. Careful. Grab the sword hilt. Got it. Ah. At one point, Gullveig, who should have been bound in chains, suddenly turned into a plume of black smoke, attempting to escape. Unfortunately for her, Just as she burst free, the Valkyrie Grey leapt into the air and gripped the hilt of Niflheim, the sword lodged in Gullveig's body. The moment she did, Gullveig let out a shrill scream as all the black smoke was yanked back into the chains, reforming into her slender, tattooed, and distinctly cursed figure. As Thelose and Thor arrived, the guarding Valkyries rushed to kneel and apologize. Forgive us, Your Majesty, we almost let her escape. Almost. No, you were far from it. Thelose couldn't hide the smile on his lips. His gaze sent a chill down Gullveig's spine. You accursed god king, what did you do to me? Gullveig roared, trembling with fury. Thelose didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Thor. My son, weren't you curious why I stopped you from attacking her earlier? How many times have you imagined what would have happened if you had struck? Thor's eyes widened. Father, how did you know? Thelose sighed. You're too easy to read. Never mind, you'll understand soon enough. Then I won't hold back. Thor raised Mjolnir and strode toward the strange, wicked goddess. Things were different now. The defiance Gullveig had shown in the Great Hall was long gone. You, stay away from me. Thor didn't listen. With a powerful leap, lightning crackled from his famous hammer, Mjolnir, and with a mighty roar, he brought it down. Crack. It was brutal. Not only did the hammer physically smash Gullveig's head to bits, but the thunderous lightning that followed charred her body black. Thor's eye twitched. His mouth, cheeks, everything spasmed slightly as he looked back at his father in confusion. Was that it? Thelose grinned. Brunhilde. The Valkyrie instantly stepped forward, planting both hands on the hilt of the mist-forged sword of Niflheim. Immediately, the quiet prison filled once more with Gullveig's agonizing screams. Ah, ah, the scene looked like it was rewinding in real time. The blackened flesh on her delicate form rapidly receded. Her shattered, not unattractive face reassembled itself as if invisible hands were rebuilding every fragment, stuffing every drop of brain matter back into place. She tried to cast a counterspell, but just as the incantation formed, Niflheim flashed, and the curse was shoved right back into her throat. Even though everyone had anticipated this, seeing it happen with their own eyes still left Thor and the Valkyries gasping softly. They couldn't hold it in. Even Thelose twitched at the corner of his mouth, silently thinking. No wonder she was the legendary Undying Queen of the Edda. Yet in that very Edda, Gullveig was only ever mentioned in this one event, taunting Odin and Thor in Asgard. There were no later appearances. That could only mean one thing. She was strong, but not too strong. If she were really that powerful, truly immortal, then the Aesir would have been wiped out long ago. So she was only the Undying Queen, not the Queen of Immortality. Thor, try killing her a few more times. Gladly. Thor raised the hammer and struck again. Before long, Brunhilde let out a startled cry. Her tattoos, they're fading. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 38. I, Gullveig, am skilled in song and dance bonus chapter. The moment Brunhilde said it, Gullveig's divine body trembled violently on the spot, shuddering like drying rice under the sun. It was such a raw, visceral reaction, there was no way anyone could fake it. Within the sky prison, lit by the steady glow of eternal fire elements, everyone clearly saw that Gullveig, though resurrected each time she was killed, wore garments that never mended. After a few more kills, they were torn apart in large patches. And that made things even more visible. Her waist, once densely inked in dark tattoos, was now a patch of flawless white. Even Thor, who wasn't known for deep thought, suddenly realized, the tattoos, they're her lives. Thelose sneered. She likely used some form of dark sorcery to seal powerful lifeforms inside her own body. When she suffers lethal damage, the injury is redirected to one of those stand-ins. But once she runs out of those substitutes, the next killing blow will truly end her. As Thelose carefully revealed the final secret behind Gullveig's so-called immortality, all the arrogance once etched on her face crumbled. She fell to her knees, head banging against the floor again and again. Lord Borson, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I didn't mean to mock the Aesir. I was following Nord's orders, provoking you into a rash assault so that you'd recklessly invade Vanaheim. Please forgive me. I never meant to insult the Aesir. Gullveig was terrified. She was genuinely afraid now. Perhaps it confirmed an old truth. Those with multiple health bars are often the ones who fear death the most. Thelose curled his lip. I'm not a sadist. I'll give you a chance. Remove the rest of those tattoos yourself. Gullveig's eyes went wide. She desperately wanted to say no. But if she didn't do it, Thor would gleefully keep killing her until every last substitute tattoo was gone. Overwhelmed by pain and despair, Gullveig finally broke down. Oh okay, I'll remove them now. Just, please allow me to use my magic. Thelose nodded slightly. Gullveig didn't dare play any tricks, most likely because the terrifying divine sword was still lodged in her body. Waves of black light shimmered over her as one tattoo after another exploded into mist, each one triggering violent spasms in her body. When it was over, she stood there like a lamb awaiting slaughter, allowing the Valkyries to thoroughly inspect her from head to toe. Your Majesty, is this enough? Gullveig asked with trembling humility. Thelose could hear the fear in her voice, the groveling words tumbling from her lips. He sighed and said, I liked you better when you were unruly. But this version isn't bad either. The once arrogant Vanir goddess gave him a fragile smile, a clear sign of submission. That very night, during the banquet in the Hall of Joy, everyone gasped when they saw the Valkyries drag Gullveig inside. The visual contrast was extreme. A Valkyrie not even 1.8 meters tall was tugging a 5-meter-tall Vanir goddess with a rope that she could have easily snapped at any time, yet Gullveig looked docile as a lamb. The recently rotated giants and gods burst into laughter and cheers on the spot. Ha 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 ha, isn't this the same goddess who mocked the entire Aesir tribe this morning? Where's your arrogance now, huh? Come on, break free. Want a sword? Let's fight again. A torrent of mockery pierced Gullveig like 1,000 daggers. Her entire body trembled violently, but she kept her head bowed, not daring to speak a single word in protest. With the devastating meteor strike from earlier, the giants and gods were now fully convinced of the God King's brilliance. That little embarrassment Odin suffered earlier in the day was long forgotten. They jeered and insulted Gullveig with unrestrained glee, delighting in the taste of revenge. Thelose clapped his hands. Instantly, silence fell over the hall. Enough. Gullveig has clearly understood her mistakes. To atone, she has decided to join the Aesir as a divine attendant. Now, let her present a traditional Vanir dance as a token of goodwill. What is humiliation? This is humiliation. The harder she had mocked the Aesir in the morning, the harder karma hit her back by nightfall. She had absolutely no desire to perform, but after submitting, that unwillingness was forcibly transformed into compliance. As the crowd howled and whistled, she knelt before the God King. Then, as the dwarven musicians launched into a hastily prepared Vanir melody, she moved like a puppet, extending her limbs in rhythm. Her face twitched from the effort of smiling as she danced, pretending she didn't hear the jeers all around her. This kind of multi-layered degradation, this was how you break a goddess. Watching her graceful, if somewhat mechanical, movements, Thelose couldn't help recalling a pattern he'd seen before crossing into this world. Why did ancient emperors always seem to end up with enemy kings who were skilled in song and dance? Simple. If your head wasn't hanging on a city wall, you had to learn to sing and dance. There was no third option. For the Aesir, who had only recently evolved from savages in hides gnawing on raw meat, enemies who mocked their kin didn't deserve a gentler ending. She couldn't match the elegance of light elves, and her looks were merely above average, but just her identity as a Vanir goddess was enough to make the audience scream in excitement, thumping their chests and waving their weapons. After 3 full songs and dances, Thelose walked forward, slung Gullveig over his shoulder like a sack of grain, and carried her off toward the back hall. The banquet erupted in a deafening roar. Gullveig hung upside down over Thelose's back, her ears filled with the ecstatic howls of gods and giants. The unbearable humiliation tore through her like 1,000 arrows. And yet, shockingly, she found herself grateful to Thelose. Grateful that he took her away rather than killing her on the spot. It preserved the last sliver of dignity she had left as a goddess. Pushed to the brink of shame, she was horrified to discover she was beginning to enjoy the feeling of being conquered. The banquet featuring Gullveig as the main act continued for 3 straight days. On the 4th day, Thelose brought her to the western cliffs of Asgard. After glancing at the giants still gleefully hurling boulders, he summoned the bow god Ullr and Heimdall. Can you spot Njord? He asked, then turned to Gullveig. Describe your former master's appearance. After a brief search with their far-seeing divine eyes, the 2 gods locked on the same figure. Found him, they said in unison. Good. Then please deliver a gift to Njord with your arrows. Yes. Gullveig, Thelose added, leave a message for your former boss. Okay. The once sharp-tongued goddess now sounded like a bullied, submissive girl. Not long after, the weary and irritated Njord received an unexpected present. It happened suddenly. The sea serpents, who'd been intercepting falling meteors for days, failed to react in time to this particular projectile, faster and more precise than the rest. Njord had long since grown tired of the meteor barrage. But after holding the line for 3 straight days, his perception had dulled, understandably so. So when Alar's arrow cut through the sky and slammed into the courtyard of Nord's divine palace, it was already too late to stop it. Boom! The marble tiles of the Grand Plaza shattered into rubble, leaving a massive crater. At its center stood a divine arrow, gigantic by mortal standards, still pulsing with divine energy. As sea wind blew across the ruins, a distinctly feminine item fluttered like a banner. Reading the runes and message inscribed on it, the face of Vanir god King Njord twisted into an expression darker than ever before. Sorry, Njord, I, Gullveig, have decided to join the Aesir and serve His Supreme Majesty Thalos Borson. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 39. The Zeal of the Converted. At that moment, no fewer than 10 Vanir gods had seen the message. Which meant, the entire pantheon knew. The expression on Nord's face was terrifying, as though his greatest rival high above in the clouds had stretched out 2 invisible hands and was slapping him across the face, over and over, until his cheeks were swollen red. 3 days. 3 full days. Not only had their homeland been subjected to an endless barrage of giant thrown boulders, leaving behind debris and devastation, but the envoy they had sent to mock the Aesir had ended up humiliated and now mocked the Vanir in return. How was Njord supposed to tolerate this? Despite all their magical tricks and clever tactics, the Vanir were, at their core, just another bunch of divine barbarians, no different from the Aesir. And the worst thing that can happen to a leader is losing face. Without prestige, a king cannot rule. Nord's eyes were bloodshot. His voice, low and deep, sounded like it came from the darkest trench of the ocean. Freyr, gather the gods. Prepare to invade Asgard. Yes, father. The tall, handsome god bowed solemnly. Freyr, son of Njord, was the strongest warrior among the Vanir beneath the god king himself. He bore this responsibility without hesitation. In truth, every Vanir god understood this. In a world still wrapped in chaos, there could only be one god king. After 3 days of being pummeled from above, tension had built to the breaking point. And now, with this humiliating challenge from the Aesir, their rage overflowed. Many had long been waiting for Nord's command. As soon as it came, the Vanir gods and their followers leapt into motion. Only Njord remained still, gently raising a hand, and with a surge of violent tidal force, he obliterated the battle invitation sent by Thalos. Then, with a face like black ice, he looked up toward the floating landmass above, as if staring down an oppressive storm cloud hanging over him. Meanwhile, in Asgard, Thalos waved a hand, signaling Tiaz and the other giants to halt their bombardment. What's wrong? We haven't even gone all out yet, Tiaz rumbled, his voice vibrating the air around them. Half of you, keep throwing at full strength. The rest, rest and recover. The Vanir gods are coming. What? Tiaz was shocked, then elated. He grabbed his giant club and scurried after Thalos like an eager hound. Soon, most of the gods and giants had assembled in the Golden Palace for a war council. Everyone was excited, though many cast curious glances toward the goddess standing at Thalos's left side, the same, skilled dancer, from earlier. Thalos spoke. Gullveig, first give a rundown of the Vanir's key combatants, their divine roles and physical traits. He hadn't even finished the sentence before Tiaz blurted out, Your Majesty, who cares who they are? We'll crush them all. Shut up and listen, or you'll be the first to die, Thalos snapped, a rare show of irritation. Tiaz was absurdly tall, nearly 25 meters, like an 8-story building. Thick-skinned and freakishly tough, he was the Aesir's vanguard warrior. In the epics, he could definitely fight, but he was also shady. He once seduced the Vanir goddess Idun, guardian of the golden apples of youth, and got himself killed for it after pissing off the whole Vanir clan. In other words, he needed strict handling. Letting him off the leash would only lead to disaster. With Thalos's authority at its peak, Tiaz immediately apologized on the spot. The now disciplined listeners sat quietly as Gullveig gave a detailed breakdown of the Vanir gods. When she finished, Thalos began. Strategically, we can afford to look down on the enemy. Tactically, we must take them seriously. From everything I've gathered, the Vanir are not significantly weaker than the Aesir. If you let your arrogance and stupidity take over, you'll end up with your heads decorating their temple gates. Coming from the God King, fresh off 2 major victories, no one dared argue. As expected, Bor was first to step forward. Your Majesty, please command us. Step 1. We've likely succeeded in forcing the enemy out of their lair. But step 2 is what truly matters. Tholos turned his gaze. Odin. Here, Odin strode forward, radiating power as he planted Gungnir before him, exuding an aura that screamed, "I'll kill any god in my way. You'll guard the Rainbow Bridge. Just as planned, lose the first battle and lure them in." Then, Bor did something rare, he voiced a concern. "Wait, Your Majesty, what if the enemy sends a smaller force for a sneak attack first?" Tholos glanced at Gulveig. "Their most well-known asset is Freyr. We know Freyr. Njord knows we know Freyr. So if they send him, it won't be a surprise attack, it'll be bait. Thor, you've got the best mobility. You'll intercept Freyr with Vidar and ULLR. Yes. Loki, Tyr, Heimdall, you each lead a detachment to support Odin. Yes. Everyone else not named, remain in the second line of defense. Await the call. We'll ambush Njord himself." Odin was nearly trembling with excitement. "Then once I fall back, I'll join you to fight Njord, right?" "No." Tholos shook his head. "You have a different job." "What?" "I'll send a signal. When you see a second Gungnir appear in the sky, that's your cue. Reclaim the Rainbow Bridge with Heimdall, then take Loki and the others, invade Vanaheim directly." But Odin looked slightly unwilling. Tholos shut it down. "When two god kingdoms of equal strength clash, it's like two giants boxing. 10 days. Half a month. They'll fight until they're exhausted. We don't even know if the next revival from Audhumla's milk will be one of our gods. This is no time for dreams of quick victory. Our best chance is in dismantling their ability to wage war." "I understand, Your Majesty, but ULLR just scouted again. The Vanir just received a fresh batch of new gods. Even Gulveig doesn't know who they are. Still think your job is easy?" At that, Odin's single eye flared with fiery resolve. "Your Majesty, I swear, I'll tear down Nord's palace." At that moment, Tholos glanced at Gulveig. "You're going with Odin. Identify who to capture and who to kill, be precise." "Why yes, Your Majesty. I'll prove my loyalty to the Aesir." Gulveig looked stunned for a second, but then she clenched her silver teeth and her wavering gaze turned resolute. This was Tholos's test, and her only chance. To betray her former pantheon was her sole path to redemption and advancement. If she failed, her future would be as nothing more than a plaything. Today, she might still hold value. But the moment Tholos lost interest in her, she couldn't even imagine what fate would await her. With no path of retreat, her eyes began to burn with intensity. This was the zeal of the converted. For those who've switched faiths, fanaticism is their only refuge. They must be more devout than those born into the faith, or they have no place at all. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 40. I anticipated your anticipation. Deploying a special unit to raid the enemy's home base during a war has always been a solid tactic, provided two things are true. First, the main battlefield must hold. If the front lines collapse, even a successful raid only salvages a partial defeat. Second, the strike team can't be too weak, otherwise, it's just a delivery of free kills. The beauty of it was that to the gods and giants, Tholos had simply sent his, somewhat weak, little brother into danger. If Odin got taken out, no big deal, right? Only Tholos himself knew how absurd his decision really was. While others send a single man to flank and lift the clan's glory, Tholos sent his god-king brother on the raid, with full expectation that the entire Aesir pantheon would rise in power because of it. In this world, no one besides Njord could even stall Odin, not for a moment. And more importantly, Tholos was the one who had shaped the laws of the Nine Realms. Did anyone really think he'd let Odin fall into a trap? Even if the Vanir front line was just a diversion, bait set by Njord himself, Tholos had full confidence he could wipe out that bait and then sit back and wait for Odin, having fallen for the trap, to return triumphant. And if by chance Odin made it back fine, but Loki died instead. Even better. That'd be 2 wins in 1. No matter what happened, Odin, after being repressed for so long, finally had the chance to lead a mission of his own. Oddly enough, it made him feel like a long-caged bird about to soar, a kind of giddy triumph blooming inside. Good thing he didn't say that out loud. If he had, Tholos's face might have turned strange. Little ding, has it occurred to you that you might actually be the rightful god king of the Aesir? Tholos didn't notice Odin's joy. Instead, he calmed the rest of the gods. Don't think the main battlefield is a thankless task. All spoils Odin brings back, including any goddesses, will be split 50-50. You get first pick. Oh, the divine brutes immediately roared with excitement. Of course, glory from slaying enemies had its appeal. But what truly spoke to these muscle-brained barbarians was the word, loot. The whole Gulveig affair had already stirred up their hunger for war. Now, with most Aesir goddesses smitten by their own god king, more and more gods and giants were considering finding themselves a Vanir wife. This was exactly why Thelose chose to share part of the spoils. Being god king was powerful, but not easy. When you have overwhelming strength and political clout, sometimes giving up a bit of personal benefit is necessary. If not, the people under you might not dare to rebel, but they could just slack off. Thelose had successfully completed the war mobilization. Meanwhile, on the Vanir side, Njord had no idea that Thelose had already anticipated his anticipation. With battle plans finalized and departure imminent, Njord suddenly pulled aside his battle-hardened son Freyr, waving his hand to create a shimmering water curtain that sealed off the surrounding space. Freyr, he said, your mission has changed. You are not to focus on killing. Your job is to make as much noise as possible, to draw the enemy's attention. But father, what about you? Freyr blinked. I'm not sure if that bitch Gulveig truly betrayed us, but I have to prepare for the worst. The enemy likely knows about you. So I've changed tactics. Once your squad lands, then I'll lead the main force in a surprise charge at the Rainbow Bridge. Ah, then I'll notify my team. No, Njord shook his head. Gulveig is cunning. She may have secretly returned and could be spying on us. Announce the plan only when you're about to engage. Understood. Freyr nodded seriously. Soon, the bait unit set off under cover of night. No shining gear, no glowing enchantments. They moved like migrating birds. Each warrior bore strange black magical wings and flew silently, wrapped in patches of thick and thin mist, slowly ascending toward the highest layer of the world tree, Asgard. Below them, moonlight occasionally broke through the clouds, bathing the scarred island in silver and casting glistening reflections on the magical sea serpents still guarding Vanaheim's core. The silver shimmer flashed and faded with each interception of falling stones, hiding the eerie silence of the bait unit's ascent. By all accounts, the ambush should have succeeded. But the closer they got, the more nervous Freyr became. The colossal, floating continent above remained still, too still. Throughout the slow ascent, all 10 Vanir gods and over 100 divine attendants remained eerily silent, exchanging uneasy glances. Fortunately, they encountered no divine archers en route, no ambush, no aerial traps. Only when they touched down on the outer edge of Asgard's floating continent did they exhale in relief. Ahead lay the distant town at the base of the Golden Palace mountain. Though shrouded in night, it still glowed with scattered firelight. Freyr made a hand signal. Let's go. Make it loud. Yes. The Golden Palace was so bright in the darkness, it couldn't be mistaken for anything else. And the town nestled at its foot had no walls, giving the appearance of a completely undefended target. The night watchmen with torches were hopelessly outmatched. At first contact, the entire town was thrown into chaos. It was like an earthquake had suddenly struck. Massive water serpents appeared out of thin air. Water balls the size of wagons slammed into houses, toppling them instantly. Wah! What's going on? Great God King, protect us! The townspeople were in total disarray, some even launched clear out the windows by the impact of bursting walls and rushing floodwater, landing hard in the streets. Several night guards tried to fight back, but were overwhelmed instantly. Aside from the sudden ringing of the town's alarm bells, everything was going exactly as Njord had planned. As Freyr looked toward the Golden Palace, expecting to see the Aesir God King scramble out in panic, a thunderous voice boomed from the sky, shaking his ears like a drumbeat. Well, the sewer rats actually showed up, huh? A towering god wreathed in lightning and gripping a short-handled warhammer descended from the sky atop roaring storm winds. That wild, bearded face was full of amusement and mockery, like a cat toying with a mouse it had finally caught. I am Freyr, war god of the Vanir and son of Njord. Aesir up there, name yourself. Freyr bellowed, slightly disappointed. This wasn't Thelose Borson, the sword-wielding king he'd heard about. I am Thor Thalson, son of God King Thelose Borson, came the proud reply. Why Thalson and not Thalsazon? Because Thalsazon was just too clunky. Thelose had simplified it himself. Besides, in a divine barbarian household, naming conventions weren't exactly strict. The moment their identities lined up, well, how fitting. Crown Prince versus Crown Prince. No more words needed. Thor shot down like a thunderbolt, Mjolnir raised high, and slammed toward Freyr with all the fury of a descending storm. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter. +5 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. +5 reviews equals +1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 41. God Kings Face Off. In the darkness, violet-blue lightning clashed violently with golden divine radiance. The resulting shockwave rolled the earth near the town's edge into layers of upheaval, tearing open a massive crater at the epicenter. From it, a chaotic swirl of divine power and shattered stone blasted outward in all directions. While Thor and Freyr battled fiercely, the other gods were far from idle. In the shadows, a single arrow shot through the air. A Vanir god raised his hammer to block it. He succeeded, at first. But just as the arrow glanced off the head of the hammer, it twisted in midair, ricocheting with a brilliant spark and suddenly veering to strike the Vanir god cleanly in the throat. To onlookers, it appeared as if the arrow had missed and merely passed by. It was only when a trail of blood arced through the air that another Vanir god nearby realized his comrade had been critically wounded. An ambush. The wounded god gasped, only then realizing that his death substitution amulet had activated, one life gone. As the two Vanir gods prepared to retaliate, the ground before them erupted. In mere seconds, an entire forest of colossal trees burst from the soil, towering into the night sky and cutting off their path. The thick woodland formation made pursuit of the Aesir bow god nearly impossible. While Vidar shielded Ullr, allowing him to unleash volley after volley of divine arrows, the accompanying giants also charged into the flanks, engaging the Vanir gods and their divine attendants in brutal close combat. The side skirmishes turned chaotic, but on the main front, Rainbow Bridge, it went just as expected. The enemy arrived. A massive sea dragon, over 100 meters long, ascended the bridge in a manner that defied nature. Its head resembled a crocodile, its body resembled a whale, an unholy hybrid of sea beasts. It slithered along the Rainbow Bridge, its massive form supported by a tremendous, spiraling surge of water that carried it up into the sky. This shouldn't have been possible. The bridge to Vanaheim had long been sealed. Though the rainbow light still shimmered, it was impassable. Clearly, some kind of mysterious oceanic divine power had altered the properties of the bridge, bending the rules of reality for just long enough to force this impossible approach. Damn it. Odin had carefully thought through how to stage a graceful defeat for this battle. Now it seemed he wouldn't need to pretend. After he hurled his first throw of the divine spear Gungnir, he instantly regretted ever giving it the attribute of space. When Gungnir collided with the massive sea dragon atop the Rainbow Bridge, it created a cascade of radiant law lines that lit up the western skies. The spear's spatial rending tore straight through the beast's defenses, blasting a hole 10 meters deep and over 3 meters wide through its back. For any lesser being, even a giant, this would have meant instant death. For this 100-meter monstrosity, it was a grievous wound, but not fatal. Roaring in fury, the dragon crashed through the golden castle at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. The structure, built of giant stone blocks with walls gilded in gold, was almost completely flattened. Half the outer wall and much of the roof exploded outward in a rain of debris, shards of gold glinting in the light, giving the destruction a strange, dazzling beauty. Odin and Heimdall threw themselves at the beast, attacking with all their might. But the creature's vitality was terrifying. Sometimes, having a big health bar is a valid strategy. The sea dragon, shrugging off the Aesir gods clinging to it, surfed the tides into District 1 of Asgard. Row after row of buildings collapsed like sandcastles under a child's foot. Compared to the dragon's bulk, they didn't even register as obstacles. In that moment, Asgard descended into utter chaos. Taking advantage of the distraction, Njord and the Vanir gods made their grand entrance. The Vanir god king, white-bearded and mostly bald, wore gleaming armor in shades of sea blue and white. Standing atop the shattered remains of the Rainbow Fortress, he swept a cold gaze across the battlefield. Upon seeing the battered Odin and his companions, Njord raised a hand and gave a single, chilling command. Kill. But just as the Vanir gods, each averaging 5 meters tall, charged across the ruins of District 1, the tide turned. Raaaah. Tear this beast apart. From the flanks, the giants charged. Led by Tiaz and the giantess Skadi, they swung massive clubs, each over 10 meters long, slamming into the sea dragon with earth-shaking fury. Letting brute force fighters handle a brute force monster was simple logic. The Vanir gods rushed to counter the giants, only for the sky itself to explode. A rain of swords, blazing, divine, and aflame with destructive energy, descended upon the battlefield. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Boom boom boom. Countless magical swords, manifestations of the fire element weapon swords of Muspelheim, appeared in the night sky. They lit up the heavens and rained down like divine meteors, engulfing the entire area in flames. The city, already designated as expendable, was reduced to a flaming wasteland. Though none of the Vanir gods were killed, most narrowly avoided the sword clones using all manner of evasive magic and tricks. Still, the entire street burned. Flames spread with the wind, racing toward the Rainbow Bridge and transforming the whole district into a fiery hell, the worst possible battlefield for the water-affiliated Vanir. Across the blaze stood a towering figure wreathed in light, clad in golden armor, divine swords spinning around him. Njord narrowed his eyes. You're the Aesir God King, Thalos Borson. And you're the would-be usurper, Njord, leader of the Vanir rabble. With just one exchange of words, the battlefield erupted again, Vanir gods cursing in fury. Barbarian. You dare call yourself a god king? You know nothing of Vanir greatness. Fool. Surrender now and we might spare your life. The Aesir, of course, fired right back, shouting and cursing with equal enthusiasm. In the midst of this storm of words, none of the Vanir gods noticed a small Aesir unit slipping silently toward the Rainbow Bridge. Njord did notice, but he could do nothing about it. Thalos's presence was overwhelming. Nord's divine domains were nothing to scoff at. Ocean, summer, storms, all formidable in their own right. But Thalos's divine authorities, kingship, prophecy, already dangerous. Add sky, war, death, magic. All first-class combat domains. And that wasn't the worst of it. The swords orbiting Thalos shimmered with the divine power of different realms. Every one of them emanated the aura of a distinct world. Nord's heart sank. To face Thalos was to pit the strength of one world against the might of 6 or 7. Granted, not all those worlds were fully awakened, and some of the 9 realm swords weren't yet showing their full power. But even a few were more than enough to give Njord a headache. Still, Njord was the god of pirates and fishermen. He didn't know the meaning of surrender. Until he was utterly broken, he wouldn't back down. Because if you don't fight, how will you ever know whether you could have won? Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 42. The times have changed. Thalos eyed the Mediterranean-style god king across from him with mild curiosity. Even after all this time since his transmigration, he still didn't quite understand why Njord, clearly caught in a trap, could maintain that arrogant, victory is within my grasp, expression. This is an age of strength. Schemes. Just decoration. If you can't win in a head-on fight, everything else is worth nothing. Absolutely nothing. And against pirates, best not to hold out any hope. They'd exchanged pleasantries, now it was time for the Aesir to show their famed hospitality. As golden radiance flared from Thalos's body, a vast golden network of light formed beneath his feet, and above his head. Made entirely of countless rune symbols, the glowing lattice spread in all directions and, in the blink of an eye, blanketed the entire battlefield. Not just the Vanir, but even the Aesir gods on his side were stunned. Their vision was completely filled with this brilliant web of light. The sky, once shrouded in night, was now illuminated. It was as if the world had leapt from the frozen darkness of an ancient age into the glowing radiance of a rising dawn. This was Thalos unleashing the divine power of his sky domain. Across from him, Njord met this divine display with one of his own. A water-blue network extended from his feet, quickly spreading across the battlefield ruins and even seeping into parts of Asgard's ground. Fountains and pools that Thalos had once painstakingly designed, and even damaged water pipelines, were suddenly activated by Nord's divine presence. As if linked directly to the ocean world of Vanaheim, waves of translucent phantom seawater gushed forth, threatening to flood the land. Unfortunately, it was all show. This world, the earth beneath their feet, had been shaped by Thalos's own will, using the world will as a foundation. It was coded, layered, and bound by laws Njord, an ancient brute of a god with no concept of physics, could never casually alter. Before his attempt to turn the land into an ocean could gain traction, it was already crumbling. Thalos chuckled. A world created by my will, and you think you can just walk in and rewrite it? Njord held his ground, his words bolder than his position. Your world is well crafted, I'll give you that. But the times have changed. From now on, this land belongs to the Vanir. We woke from our frozen slumber to find a home. This is where we sleep, where we rise, where we thrive. Why not surrender now? End the war before more blood is spilled. Whether by malice or fate, 2 god king wills now clash to top the highest continent of Yggdrasil. Thalos could feel it clearly. By infusing Asgard with more elements than the Edda had originally described, he had inadvertently allowed water to gain a faint resonance here too. That was the price. By not restricting the world to a single elemental domain, other gods could also gain minor advantages. This, perhaps, was why Njord had dared barge into the Aesir homeland and throw his weight around. Even the world will was faintly welcoming Nord's presence. After all, the world needed a god to oversee oceans and the shaping of life. But that tiny advantage was far from enough to secure victory. Yes, the times have changed. Thelose declared, golden longblade raised high. Maybe the future of Yggdrasil no longer belongs to the Aesir alone, but no one ever said a clan like the Vanir could stand above us. As the Aesir god king spoke, golden brilliance broke through the darkness of the heavens, dazzling like the first rays of dawn. That moment was engraved in the minds of every witness, an unforgettable scene destined to become legend. Someday, bards and believers would recite it as epic tale, passed down for generations. Far away, many mortal followers of the Aesir, those who had grown up hearing stories of Thelose and his brothers creating the world, watched in awe. They had dreamed of one day witnessing the God King's glory with their own eyes. Now, that wish had finally been granted. Thelose swung his right arm downward, this time wielding the radiant sword of Alfheim, symbol of light. In his eyes, holy golden flames burned. His gaze pierced through space itself to see into the neighboring realm of Alfheim, the realm of the Light Elves. That realm heard his call. From high above, beams of light curved through the void in a colossal arc, descending into Asgard's first district. A divine rain of light fell through the night sky and struck the battlefield with godly fury. Half the battlefield was instantly engulfed. Nord's expression changed. He raised his right hand, fingers spread upward. Opposite the falling light, an entire water element army emerged from the phantom sea at his feet. Condensed from divine water power, they took all forms. Some looked like fishmen, others like seahorses, and countless others were shaped as oceanic beasts. With a deafening surge of water, tens of thousands of elemental creatures soared skyward to intercept the falling light. Fwoosh, 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 boom, boom. One after another, water elementals were blasted apart midair, bursting into inert water that rained down on the battlefield like a torrential storm. More continued their suicidal charge upward, bravely confronting the rain of holy fire. Until, at last, there were no more swords of light. And no more water elementals left to rise. This was a textbook clash of god kings. Not a contest of victory or defeat, more like a spectacle far beyond the reach of ordinary gods. Unknowingly, both armies had cleared the central battlefield. Now, the Aesir and Vanir let their kings duel while they fought one-on-one at the outskirts. Then, Njord taunted first. Is that all the mighty god king of the Aesir has? Thelose laughed. Hey, that was just an appetizer. Light isn't even my specialty. Of course Njord knew that. Despite Thelose's colossal display, his divine aura hadn't weakened in the slightest. Njord, on the other hand, had paid a steep price. His massive water elemental army had cost him true divine essence. Realizing brute force wasn't working, Njord began preparing a more intricate magical counter. But Thelose didn't fight by the book. Warm-up's over, Njord. Warm-up. That was a warm-up. Just as Njord summoned a new wave of divine sea guardians, Thelose calmly swapped to another sword. This time, the one representing Midgard, the realm of mankind, Sword of Midgard. In the blink of an eye, a massive legion of spectral Einherjar warriors appeared, each one larger, fiercer, and more numerous than Nord's sea guardians. They surged forward in a tide of steel and wrath, and drowned Nord's army in the fury of mortals reborn. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 43. Beating a drowned dog. Thelose had already tested Nord's strength. For this Vanir god king who could fight Odin to a stalemate in the Epic Edda, Thelose's personal evaluation was, yes, he could kill him, but it depended on the battlefield. If they fought head-on in Nord's home territory of Vanaheim, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Thelose might win, but Vanaheim would be utterly destroyed, and the elemental balance of several other worlds would be thrown into chaos. That kind of loss was unacceptable for the one who held dominion over all 9 realms. But in Asgard, Njord was significantly weakened. Yes, he could still draw oceanic power from Vanaheim, but even so-called unlimited resources have a flow rate limit. A mountain stream can't compare to a mighty river. When holed up in his home base, Njord summoned water with the force of a flood. In Asgard, it was a trickle. Thelose hadn't used his full strength from the start for a simple reason: he didn't want to take any damage himself. After all, if you fight a dog and get bitten, are you going to bite it back? Why had Thelose held back earlier? Because he was aiming for a clean victory, no injuries. Now, after Njord had been worn down by 3 waves of intense divine power, he was exactly where Thalos wanted him, exhausted, with his old power spent and his new strength not yet regenerated. His movements visibly slowed. Thalos, already in a dominant position, seized the moment and brought down the sword of Alfheim with ruthless precision. He didn't hold back this time. In that instant, the nearby floating continent of Alfheim, home of the Light Elves, dimmed. The sword glowed brighter than ever. A beam of radiant golden energy, far larger than before, surged forth from the glowing sword suspended in the sky. In a blink, it shattered Nord's divine shield, pierced through his chest, and pinned him to the ground like a golden stake through a vampire's heart. The scene left the Vanir gods horrified. The god they saw as invincible, their mighty king, had just been killed. Ah! Gasps echoed through the ranks. Njord had never imagined the same sword, just moments apart, could vary in power so drastically. Caught completely off guard, he lost one of his divine lives on the spot. His form twisted grotesquely, unable to hold his humanoid shape. Thalos wasn't surprised when Njord transformed into a massive, 100-meter-long sea dragon. With a casual horizontal sweep of the light sword, he cleaved the beast down completely. When he flung the corpse aside, Nord's true body reappeared in a nearby pool of water, just as expected. But this was far from over. In most real battles, the deadliest damage doesn't happen during the clash, but in the aftermath, when one side is collapsing and the other presses the advantage. And Thalos was not one to show mercy. With perfect timing, he hurled another divine blade, the sword of Muspelheim, embodiment of fire. At the exact moment Njord tried to summon another shield, the fiery blade tore through space and impaled his abdomen. The poor sea god let out a wretched scream as his body ignited from within. Flames erupted throughout his body. Fire consumed his organs and flesh, but remained trapped inside a strange layer of watery membrane clinging to his skin, making him look like an overinflated balloon filled with lava. 2 seconds later, he burst. And still, Njord endured. Truly, this was the same Vanir god king who had once stood toe-to-toe with Odin in the early Edda days. Even grievously wounded, he lashed out in fury. With a backhanded wave, he summoned a towering tidal wave and hurled it toward Thalos. But Thalos only smiled. With a flick of the sword of Niflheim, swirling fog twisted the oncoming sea wave and gently redirected it away, like guiding a charging bull by the horns. Only then did Njord finally give up his second divine life. His second corpse. A massive, snow-white crab, its shell spanning more than 100 meters. Still, it wasn't over. When Njord appeared for the third time, the skies above shuddered. Countless metallic particles gathered together in a swirling mass, forming a titanic, 30-meter-long black iron sword, the sword of Svartalheim, representing the dwarves. Unlike the others, this sword had no edge. It was the epitome of blunt force trauma. Pure weight, pure impact. Normally, Njord would have avoided it with ease. He had countless tricks and evasive techniques to dodge brute force attacks like this. But at that moment, his power hadn't regenerated. The oceanic energy he tried to draw simply wasn't enough. Ah, the sword came down with the weight of a mountain. It cleaved him clean in half, from his bald head straight through to his groin. Agony. Unbearable agony. That was Nord's third life gone. His third corpse took the shape of a grotesque deep-sea anglerfish, its head bloated and monstrous. That final death shattered the morale of the remaining Vanir gods. Many began looking for ways to retreat. Now Njord was wary. His next appearance was split into over 100 water elemental clones, each one resembling him and exuding his divine aura. He had divided his last remaining life across these many clones. No more speeches. No more boasts. Njord desperately hurled a flurry of water orbs in all directions, not to attack, but to disrupt the battlefield, buying time for his followers to escape. He didn't even dare look at Thalos. He unleashed another few enormous tidal waves to obstruct Thalos's line of sight, then he and his forces leapt from the edges of Asgard, fleeing for their lives. He knew, if he didn't run now, he might never get the chance again. Thalos cast one final rain of divine light. Only a few twitching tentacles of a slain giant octopus remained. Hey, come and go as you please. What do you think Asgard is? A marketplace? Thalos's expression remained calm, but to his enemies, his smile was terrifying. Rising into the air, divine energy streaming behind him like wings, he painted a golden trail across the sky. With a sharp whistle, the nearby Valkyries snapped their reins. Snow-white Pegasi leapt into the skies, carrying their riders into pursuit. In the heavens, a phantom of the divine Spyrgnir appeared. The moment had come. Time to beat the drowning dog. Odin's strike team immediately stormed the Rainbow Bridge. Not all Vanir gods could fly. Most of their divine attendants certainly couldn't. They needed the Rainbow Bridge to escape. A few Vanir gods chose to stay behind and hold the line. But they were no match for Odin. One throw of Gungnir, space itself warped and twisted. The light blinked, and a handful of Vanir gods collapsed, their massive bodies crashing to the earth. Unfortunately, this didn't mean Odin had killed them. But it did mean, they weren't going anywhere. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 44. God King strikes from behind, whole clan ascends. As Vanir gods, each one had a secret trick or two up their sleeve. One transformed into a massive, exaggerated blossom, shedding divine petals to survive what should have been a killing blow. Another morphed into a colossal octopus, sacrificing limbs to escape death. Under normal circumstances, these enemies should have been tough to handle. But the Aesir, there were too many of them, and they were too damn strong. Heimdall and Tyr swung their divine swords with brutal precision, cutting down two Vanir who had just narrowly survived. Then they cut them down again. And again. At last, one of the Vanir gods fell, no strange clone or beast emerging to take their place. Just a bloodied, humanoid corpse collapsing with a heavy thud. Loki had struck the blow. Whoa, he really died. Loki blinked in mock innocence, holding a bloodied giant's axe. His playful expression was that of someone who'd just squashed a bunny, not slain a true god. Yes. Standing beside him, Gullveig couldn't hide the sorrow on her face. Not every Vanir god stores away a library of backup lives like I did. Traitor. Wretch. Disgrace. Even as they staggered under the pressure, the remaining Vanir still hurled venomous curses at their turncoat. Gullveig's face turned pale. Her body trembled slightly. She didn't strike back, but she did speak. Anger. Maluka. The Vanir cannot defeat the Aesir. Surrender. Ever the noble soul, Tyr bellowed. Surrender, and you will be spared. I refuse. One of the Vanir snapped. Loyal, if not powerful, these rearguard defenders had been handpicked by Njord for their steadfastness. They triggered signal flares, calling desperately for reinforcements, even as they continued their hopeless resistance. Far above, locked in high-altitude combat with Thelozan now down to his fourth life, Njord saw the signal, and panicked. You Aesir want to wipe us all out? He roared, eyes bloodshot. PFF'd. Theloz laughed, genuinely amused. What a joke. You were the ones who clapped your hands and declared war. Sure, you can start it, but when and how it ends? That's not up to you. Humph. Njord fell silent. His body blurred and twisted into a massive, phantom manta ray, summoning a translucent tidal wave hundreds of meters wide to crash down upon Theloz. Theloz didn't even bother to block. With a single Z-shaped maneuver through the air, he elegantly sidestepped Njord's grand move. And right then, the divine sword switched. The sword of Jotunheim, element of ice, slashed downward in a glacial arc. Njord had no time for defense. He met it with the top of his skull. Life number 4, gone. Theloz pressed the assault relentlessly. Njord, finally catching a breath, was immediately forced back into another high-intensity elemental duel. Each clash between the two god kings erupted in dazzling flashes of light in the sky. Shockwaves of chaotic elemental energy rippled across the heavens. If this were happening over Asgard, the devastation would be unimaginable. But in the skies, Theloz could unleash his full power without concern. Njord had no way of diverting attention, no room to respond to what came next. Which is why, below, Odin's strike team cleaned up the last Vanir defenders with ease. This area's yours now, Odin said solemnly, looking at Heimdall. The pale Aesir god grinned, flashing his signature row of glittering golden teeth. Go, second uncle. Unless Njord himself comes back, no one's taking Rainbow Bridge from me. Good. Odin nodded. He didn't waste time. With the God Kings locked in aerial battle, it was the perfect moment for a flanking strike. Midrealm. Vanaheim, Vanir queen and goddess of fertility, Nerthus, clasped her hands anxiously, eyes fixed on the distant lights above, the thunderous flashes erupting from Asgard in the sky. Since the Aesir homeland had come under attack, the irritating rain of falling stones had finally stopped. The only thing left for the defenders to do was wait. A radiant, sultry blonde goddess in a floor-length golden robe stepped beside her, gently linking arms. Mother, will father win? My precious Freya, Nerthus said softly, though her brow was creased with worry. He will. He must. 2 straight defeats had cast a long shadow over the Vanir. This feeling, being dragged along by the enemy's tempo, was maddening. There could be no retreat. In a world cloaked in chaos, there was room for only one supreme god clan. Like it or not, there had to be a victor. At the very least, a top king must be crowned. Otherwise, neither side would ever submit. And just as the Vanir were praying for salvation, it happened. A rainbow exploded through the night, descending with blinding brilliance that lit up the entire world of Vanaheim. From within the radiant column of light, several colossal figures emerged, and immediately began slaughtering giants. The Vanir screamed, their voices cracking in fear. Every so often, ancient giants would wake from icy slumber and storm Asgard, trying to kill Aesir gods. But if these giants had lived long, they were definitely Aesir-aligned. Their glowing bronze armor said it all. To the Vanir, these massive beasts were terrifying enough as is. But armed, even worse. Leading the charge were Thalos's aunt and uncle, their whole family, in fact, along with Loki's two brothers, Helblindi and Byleister. All four wielded custom spiked iron clubs, and every swing was a bloodbath. The mortal guards under the Vanir's command looked like stick figures, blasted into the air in clusters. Their bodies twisted in unnatural ways mid-flight. Some were dead before they hit the ground. Use magic. Stop them. A Vanir god shouted. He never finished the sentence. A brilliant streak of spear light pierced the night sky and ended his first life before the last syllable left his lips. Against a battlefield like this, Gingnir was like an adult wading into a daycare. Careful, that one's dangerous. Another tried to warn, only to feel a sharp pain in his back. Dead. Loki, dressed in a flowing green robe, casually adjusted his collar in the wind, flashing a mischievous grin. Who? Me? Dangerous. Nonsense. These days, Loki didn't even rank in the Aesir's top 5. But here, facing third-rate Vanir defenders, he might as well have been a god of war. Raising his sword, swinging down, spinning in midair, every strike was a stylized flourish, but each one reaped Vanir lives like wheat. Their downfall had begun, and the God King's flank assault would soon bring an entire pantheon to its knees. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 45. Home base secured bonus chapter 1. In just a few short exchanges, several divine corpses already lay at Loki's feet. His kill rate was almost on par with Odin's. This elite strike team, comprising Odin, Tyr, Loki, and 2 other Aesir gods watching over Gulveig, was an unstoppable force. No Vanir god could stand against them for more than a moment. Once the massive elemental sea serpents guarding the sea god temple were blown apart by a single throw of Gingnir, there was nothing left between the Aesir and the radiant figures at the temple's entrance. Indeed, the saying proved true. When the god king flanks, the entire clan falls. Letting someone like Odin, the foolish second brother of the Aesir, run wild in enemy territory was a blow the Vanir could never afford. And because he was only Odin, no one could even protest the strategy. Gulveig pointed at the 2 goddesses standing at the front of the temple steps. The one leading them is Queen Nerthus. And the beautiful one beside her is the Vanir goddess of beauty, Freya. The voice of the traitor drained all color from the Vanir goddesses' faces. Unsurprisingly, Gulveig's betrayal stirred up a storm of wrath. The Vanir goddesses unleashed their most venomous curses. But she accepted it all calmly. You don't know the true might of the Aesir. You've never seen what His Majesty Thalos can do. Once you witness it, you'll kneel before him, drunk on reverence, just like I did. Her shamelessness only amplified the torrent of verbal abuse. The Vanir goddesses' confidence stemmed from the massive, sapphire blue energy barrier around the temple, a divine formation powered by Nord's spellwork in the entire realm of Vanaheim. This water element world was Nord's bottomless well of divine power. Standing within its protection, the Vanir goddesses hurled insults with righteous fervor. Even if every other temple in the land were destroyed, even if all their male defenders fell, as long as they were safe, the Vanir still held dignity. Or so they believed. Unless a God King level threat arrived, they were confident they could hold out until Nord's return. Unfortunately for them, the Aesir had more than one God King candidate. While Tyr hesitated, unsure of how to breach the temple, Odin made his move. In theory, his space divine authority wasn't as potent as fate. But sometimes, space was far more useful. Odin whispered to his comrades, I'm going to try breaking the formation. Maybe I won't destroy it completely, but if we can grab even one hostage, it's worth it. Tyr, Loki, and the others nodded in unison. Odin adjusted his stance, stretched his left arm forward, raised Gingnir in his right, took a few light steps, then lunged forward, bellowing. Ha! He hurled Gingnir with his full divine might. Elsewhere, the Lows had just taken Nord's fifth life. Their battle had moved from the skies down to the lower airspace near Vanaheim. While still drawing divine power from the Nine Realms, the Lows no longer had absolute dominance. The world will recognize Njord as ruler of Vanaheim, allowing him to draw the sea's power at far greater speed. Their elemental trades were now less cost-effective. You can't kill me, Njord growled. I still have more lives. PFF'd. What do you have left? Vanaheim only has 7 great oceanic beasts. Counting your own, I'd say you've got 3 lives max. You think you can just grow more of those? Njord said nothing. The Lows chuckled, then summoned the death-powered Helheim sword. A surge of deathly mist swallowed Njord whole. He had nowhere to run. 6th life, gone. At this point, the Lows was actually impressed. This guy was nothing if not tenacious. He now understood why the Edda described the Vanir Aesir war lasting so long. Both sides wanted to destroy the other, but the world will refuse to let either perish. The best conclusion: one clan conquers the other, without total annihilation. When Nord's final soul transfer emerged, he dove into his familiar ocean. The Lows clearly sensed Nord's power surging again. Interestingly, Njord didn't flee back to his temple. The Lows smiled. All the better. That's when Njord felt something terribly wrong at the Sea God Temple. Damn you Aesir, he roared. You think you can harm the roots of the Vanir by attacking my temple? Impossible. You'll never breach it. Ha 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 ha. The Lows burst into laughter. Hey Njord, want to bet on that? If Odin manages to get something out of there, you drop to your knees and kowtow. Njord wanted to retort, casting out sea whirlpools at the Lows. Then he paused. Wait, why would I bet anything with you? Ha, no guts, yet you dare call yourself a god king. The Lows mocked, using the Midgard sword to slash through the sea storms. Suddenly, a chilling premonition flooded Nord's heart. No. Back in Vanaheim, the Vanir goddesses, smug in their unbreakable defense, went pale as a beam of divine light shattered their confidence. Time seemed to freeze. They instinctively stopped speaking. To some, Gingnir's attack was a blur. To others, it was a magnificent dance of death. Everyone, however, saw it clearly. Gingnir curved smoothly around the water barrier's threads of divine law, skipped through a localized space warp, and struck the core node of the protective array. What? Ah! The screams of the Vanir goddesses filled the hall. The temple's mortal priests stood frozen in terror, watching as the massive Aesir warriors charged in, knocking them aside like toys. The goddesses had no time to react. Odin, Loki, Tyr, and Gullveig stormed the temple steps and reached out toward the fleeing goddesses. Stop this! Queen Nerthus reacted quickly, slapping a glowing orb beside her. A hidden failsafe activated. Water energy surged forward, ejecting the Aesir intruders just as they captured their prey. Freya almost escaped. She activated a divine barrier, only for Gullveig to interrupt it with a shadow arrow. Staggering, she drew her sword, only to be overwhelmed by Odin. Freya wasn't weak. She was the Vanir goddess of war. Even Tyr wouldn't dare say he could beat her in one move. But this was Odin, the one who drank the blood of the primordial giant Ymir. One clash, and Freya's sword flew from her hands. Odin seized her wrist. Boom. The Sea Temple's defense ejected the intruders with enough force to kill most gods. But this squad, there were no weaklings. Ha 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 ha. Odin, Tyr, and Loki all roared with victorious laughter as they looked at their spoils. Queen Nerthus survived. She almost wished she hadn't. Because in the hands of the Aesir were faces she knew all too well, Freya, Radwig, and Krupvol. Her daughters. Far above, Njord sensed the temple's ultimate defense activating. Never had he imagined a second Aesir god would push him this far. He had to return. That final defense consumed seawater from all of Vanaheim. Every 10 seconds, the ocean dropped 1 centimeter. If the Lows held him here too long, the seas would be gone, and the Vanir finished. Damn it all! Njord roared. The Lows. Leave or die. The Lows smiled. Seeing the Sea Temple's reaction, he figured Odin had succeeded. He raised a hand. A burst of elemental fireworks exploded above his head. At the Rainbow Bridge, Heimdall received the signal and stabbed the Swordbert gang into the control pillar. A beam of rainbow light plunged from the sky, landing in front of the Sea Temple. Odin grinned. Ha 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 ha. That's it for today. We'll be back for more. Under the stunned stares of Queen Nerthus and the Vanir goddesses, Odin and his team walked into the rainbow light, carrying their captives. Njord and his returning Vanir could only watch helplessly as the raiders vanished. The rainbow beam blinked out over 3 kilometers from Nord's position. Too far. All he could do was rage, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. When he finally reached the Sea Temple, He found only corpses, ruin, a plummeting sea level. And the bitter, inescapable truth. He'd lost 3 more lives, countless gods. And among the captured, his daughters. The Vanir had lost everything: honor, power, and pride. Njord wanted to curse the sky, to scream at his nemesis. But he couldn't. He was afraid. He couldn't even imagine what tricks the Lows still had left. And then, just when he thought it couldn't get worse, his queen approached with trembling lips. Njord, Freyr, hasn't returned. His face turned deathly pale. His most cherished heir, the Vanir god of war, was gone, too. Blank. Check out my Patreon for +200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. +50 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. +5 reviews equals +1 extra chapter. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 46. Feast, beheadings, and accepting them as dogs. The laughter never disappears, it simply shifts from one Pantheon's faces to another's. When the Aesir gods and giants saw Odin and his men return triumphant from Vanaheim, an earth-shaking cheer erupted through the ruined Golden Palace. Ha ha ha, what Vanir gods? Just a bunch of rats. Those idiots. Every one of their moves was within His Majesty's expectations. I really want to see what kind of face that Njord is making right now. Countless jabs and mocking jeers turned into invisible arrows, piercing deep into the hearts of the captured Vanir goddesses. The unrestrained, predatory stares from the Aesir gods and giants chilled them to the bone, freezing even their divine souls. When they lowered their eyes, they saw the severed heads of Vanir gods hanging from the Aesir's belts. This was the hell of cold terror and despair. The Vanir goddesses tried to shrink in on themselves. Their beauty and seductive figures had become their worst curse. Only Freya, among them all, stood with her back straight and head held high, shielding her 2 sisters behind her with trembling arms. The Lows didn't even spare her a glance. Instead, he strode warmly toward Odin and pulled him into a tight bear hug. Big brother, I'm not your foolish little brother anymore, am I? Odin said deliberately. If you had refused to withdraw, insisted on fighting Njord to the death, and cost our strike team valuable lives, then yes, you'd still be that foolish brother. The Lows chuckled. But this time, you did great. Praise from the God King himself made Odin feel like his soul was floating in honey. His grin nearly split his face. Just as he was about to proudly present their spoils, a sudden thunderclap from the distance drew everyone's attention. Odin raised an eyebrow. Oh, Thor still hasn't wrapped things up. Shall we go take a look? Elsewhere, Thor was growing frustrated. Unlike Odin, who struggled to finish off Njord, Thor had always held the upper hand against Frey, his counterpart among the Vanir. As always, Vanir excelled in magic and tricks, Aesir dominated in brute strength and close combat. Initially, Frey had used his magic and divine weapon Victory Sword to keep Thor at bay, kiting him around the battlefield. Without a retreat order from Njord, he couldn't fall back. The plan worked, at first. But when Frey's subordinates were killed one by Vidar and the bow god Ullr, it quickly turned into a one-sided beatdown. And even though the other Aesir gods didn't join in, their mere presence loomed heavily over Frey, further weakening him. Even with Vidar declaring, "We're doing this one-on-one. No tricks," the pressure was unbearable. With lower raw power, Frey quickly lost his first life. He tried to flee, only to be blocked again by Vidar. That was bad enough, and then, disaster struck. Njord lost. Which meant, Frey had nowhere left to run. Before long, the rest of the Aesir came to watch the final duel. Despair consumed Frey. The divine radiance of the Victory Sword clashed wildly with Thor's thunder hammer, sparks scattering in all directions. Though it looked like Thor was being pushed back, his gear was terrifying. He wore a set of silver scale armor forged by dwarves, practically a divine artifact. Had Frey not wielded a first-rate sword, that armor alone would have made Thor completely unscathed. Loki grinned mischievously. Getting tired, Thor? Want me to step in and finish him? Shut up, Loki, Thor roared. I've already killed him once. Stay there and watch as I finish the job. At this stage, Thor was still the textbook god of the hammer, relying heavily on his giant blood. His strength and stamina were unmatched. When it came to slugfests, Thor feared no one. The Aesir gods burst into a round of rowdy laughter. Everyone knew, Vanir gods were absurdly hard to kill. Anyone who could take even one of their lives was already considered powerful. Soon enough, Frey slipped again, and Thor took his second life. But Frey didn't give up. Bloodied, gritting his teeth, he fought on desperately. His resilience actually earned him a measure of respect among the Aesir. But everyone knew, the outcome was sealed. At that moment, a calm yet resolute female voice rang out. Your Majesty, I beg you to spare Frey. Everyone turned in unison. Freya, the most beautiful goddess of the Vanir, stepped forward from among the prisoners. Under countless eyes, she walked with unwavering steps until she reached Thalos and gave a respectful bow. And why should I spare him? Thalos asked, gazing down at her. He had to admit, Freya had reason to be proud. If Frigg was regal and elegant, Freya was pure seduction. With a sharp, alluring face, almond-shaped eyes, fiery crimson curls, porcelain skin, flawless makeup, and impossibly voluptuous curves paired with a fragile waist, she was the embodiment of desire in Norse myth. Even Odin, who had captured her, kept sneaking glances at her. The surrounding Aesir gods didn't even try to hide their stares. But Freya didn't flinch under Thalos's question. She answered firmly. Your Majesty may take me. Thalos's expression didn't change. You already belong to the Aesir. Freya said clearly, I offer not just my body, but my heart. All of me. Spare Frey, and I will fight for the Aesir. I will slay every Vanir I meet on the battlefield. Before Thalos could answer, Frey finally snapped. No, sister. Don't kneel to that devil for my sake. Shut up. Thor barked, slamming Frey with a barrage of hammer strikes, leaving him unable to speak. Many Aesir gods were far more straightforward. They didn't see anything wrong with Freya's offer. In fact, they thought it was a great deal. After all, ever since Borsun's time, the Aesir had embraced the marriage by capture tradition. Giantess or goddess, it didn't matter. Take them home, claim them, and soon they'd settle into daily life. Even Odin sneered with amusement. Only Thalos remained silent. He scanned the crowd, then announced in a loud voice. I actually think this boy has potential. He might just fit in well with the Aesir. The entire hall went into an uproar. That's right, Thalos's play was simple. Feast, beheadings, and take them in as dogs. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 47. We will win. Even though Thalos had already mentally prepared for parts of Asgard to be destroyed and sacrificed as part of the greater plan, actually seeing the realm in such devastation made every one of his subordinates boil with suppressed fury. But things were different now. Njord had lost 3 of his lives. Nearly 10 Vanir gods had died completely, beheaded. On top of that, Odin's stealth strike had captured a whole group of Vanir goddesses and slain even more Vanir gods. Every ounce of pent-up resentment had been unleashed. This grand victory had propelled Thalos's prestige as God King to an all-new height. When he voiced his next thoughts, his followers all broke into knowing smiles. Back when he had killed 2 of the primordial frost giant ancestors, Thalos hadn't eradicated them. Instead, he recruited many frost giants into his fold. That was conquest. And now, if the Vanir were toppled and forced to surrender, that too would be conquest. Thor, for all his fiery temperament and obsession with battlefield glory, had one particularly admirable trait: he was very filial. Maybe it was because he knew his intelligence couldn't compare to his father's, but no one obeyed Thalos's words more than Thor. And since the God King had spoken, none of the other gods or giants had any objections. The only one who objected was Frey himself. No, Freya, don't submit. Broken in both mind and spirit, Frey made a desperate attempt to rush toward his sister, only for Thor to seize the moment. Above them, the dark clouds churned into a vortex directly overhead, and in less than a second, lightning flashed at the center. Boom! A thunderous bolt the width of 10 meters roared down from the heavens, surging into the head of Mjolnir, and with brutal force, it smashed directly into Frey's shoulder, collapsing half of his upper body in an instant. His famed victory sword clanged to the ground. Ah! Even though she had already braced herself for the worst, the ferocity of that attack still made Freya reel in horror. He still has more than one life, doesn't he? Thalos commented coldly. Yes. Freya bowed her head in resignation once more. Over there, as Frey fell into a near-death state, Thor very casually delivered a Spartan-style front kick. Thud! Frey shot off like a cannonball. Mid-flight, he glared back at Thalos, hatred boiling in his eyes. He tried to curse him, but only coughed up blood. Bleg. Far away, Thalos gazed silently at the broken and anguished Frey. Then, without warning, he pulled Freya into his embrace, his hand snaking around her soft waist, and said with a leisurely tone. There's no such thing as impossible, only things you're unwilling to give up. Don't worry. I look forward to the day you return to Asgard, either as an enemy, or kneeling at the foot of my throne. Frey was launched farther and farther, until he passed beyond the boundaries of Asgard like a shooting star, falling into the lower realms. He was filled with hate. The wind was cold. More than that, he was powerless. Eventually, his godly body couldn't take it anymore and exploded in midair in a burst of light. By the time he regained consciousness, it was with another of his divine lives. For a true god who wielded powerful magic, such a fall wouldn't kill him. A pair of glowing wings unfurled from his back, halting his plummet and letting him regain control. Before long, back in Vanaheim at the sea god's temple. Look, Frey, goddess Nerthus beamed in joy upon seeing her son return alive. There was no time for warmth or greetings. Tears already streaming down his face, Frey rushed to his father Njord, gripping his shoulders in desperation. Father, we'll strike back at Asgard, right? We'll take back Freya and the others, right? We'll win, right? Njord's expression twisted in irritation as he brushed his son's hands away. In the past, he wouldn't have minded. But not today. Today, in every sense, he had to uphold his dignity as a god king. His lips twitched for a long while before he finally forced out the words. We'll win. Of course we'll win. We just need more time to gather the gods. Even Njord didn't sound confident. What morale could remain among the Vanir gods and their followers? Just one battle, and the Aesir had nearly shattered the Vanir spirit. Frey's heart went cold on the spot. Gather more. That meant even Njord was admitting he was inferior to Thalos. Besides, who knew when that massive cow would lick out another sibling god? More Aesir gods could awaken next. The gods and this world itself were giant blind boxes. No one retained a full memory of pre-freeze history. No one knew how many allies or enemies were still buried beneath the glaciers, waiting for the great cow to uncover them. One thing was certain. There probably wouldn't be another attack tonight. But tomorrow, those damn giants would probably start hurling stones again. Njord gritted his teeth and barked. I'll greatly reinforce the island's protective barrier. At what cost? It was easy to predict. The sea level would continue to fall. He didn't know if the ocean would completely dry out, but he knew one thing. He had no better options. On the other side, under the night sky, the mood in Asgard couldn't have been more joyful. With Heimdall and a handful of vigilant gods and Valkyries standing guard, the rest of the gods and giants gathered in the Palace of Joy. Thalos was ready to hand out rewards. Amidst rousing, festive music, Thor took the stage with excitement, standing in for his father to announce the honors. First, to our greatest contributor, His Majesty the God King. He brilliantly ambushed the damn Vanir and struck down their leader Njord 3 times. To honor his glory, we offer him the most beautiful goddess of the Vanir, Freya. With a grin, Thor banged his hammer against a golden shield, letting out a resonant clang. All the gods and giants around followed suit, slamming their weapons against whatever nearby metal they could find, unleashing a wild metallic chorus. Whistles and cheers filled the air. As the dwarven musicians picked up tempo, the great doors of the Palace of Joy swung open. Accompanied by a sword dance performed by several beautiful Valkyries, Freya entered the hall wearing silver armor on her upper body and a plated war skirt on her lower half. She strode forward with majestic grace. Barefoot, she danced down the red carpet like a butterfly flitting through flowers. Her flowing sword dance dazzled every spectator. With the music rising to a dramatic crescendo, her whirling steps grew even faster. Her skirt ribbons and bells twirled alongside her, mesmerizing the crowd. Finally, she spun up to the steps before Thalos's throne, then sat with one graceful motion. Her smooth, fair legs extended elegantly as she raised her ceremonial, unopened sword high above her head. She was no longer a delicate prisoner. In that moment, she was the Vanir goddess of war, surrendering to the Aesir god king. Oh. The gods and giants roared in exhilaration. Thalos descended the steps, took the sword from her, and casually passed it to a Valkyrie beside him. Then, lifting her delicate chin, he met her bewitching gaze. Very good. From this day forth, you are mine alone. I obey, my lord god king. He pulled her into his arms with a single motion, letting her rest against him in a princess carry. Thalos smiled and nodded to Thor. Go on. Blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 48. Odin's Ambition bonus chapter 2. With his left arm wrapped around the stunningly beautiful Freya, and his right hand lifting a golden goblet filled with fine wine poured by the now servile Gullveig, dressed like a palace maid, Thalos embodied the classic image of a supreme god surrounded by conquered beauty. The sight electrified the hall. Once again, the gods and giants howled with unbridled excitement. What did this scene represent? It was the ultimate rebuttal to the Vanir challengers. It was the clearest symbol that the Aesir were on the verge of completely conquering the Vanir. Within the Aesir, Thelos's prestige rose to yet another peak. Perhaps every being in the realm offered heartfelt praise for Thelos, everyone except one god, Odin. Because such a beautiful goddess, Odin wanted her too. He cast a glance at Thelos, full of envy and frustration, a perfect mirror of an old grievance. He remembered the arrival of Frigga, the radiant blonde goddess. He had fallen for her at first sight. And yet, she would rather cry in the golden palace than laugh in the bronze one. She wanted a king, not some second-tier prince. Odin accepted that humiliation. But now with Freya, it was happening again. Even in defeat, Freya had done everything she could to carve out a better future for herself and her brother Frey. Were they wrong? From their perspective, perhaps not. And Odin knew that, but he still couldn't accept it. Why was he always left with his brother's leftovers? Why? Just because Thelos was the god king. This time, he couldn't take it anymore. The seed of envy sprouted like mad within Odin, its roots digging deeper and deeper. He clenched his teeth, his lips pressed tight, and just then, Loki caught a glimpse of him. Odin, you all right? Startled, Odin quickly forced a smile. Ah, I'm fine. Really? Realizing he couldn't fool the cunning Loki, Odin confessed, honestly, I really like Freya. But she likes Big Brother more. Nothing I can do. Oh, don't worry. Maybe you'll meet an even better goddess next time. Loki tried to console him sincerely. Odin suddenly felt a little comforted. Perhaps only Loki and the entire tribe truly stood with him. His mood lightened. Then Thor's voice boomed across the hall. Raising both arms dramatically, he shouted. Second merit of this war goes to my valiant uncle, Odin. He flawlessly executed our god king's diversion strategy, and even broke through the Vanir's sea temple. After speaking, Thor made a raise the roof gesture with his hands. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Odin straightened his expression, walking with purpose to the steps below Thelos's throne and bowed respectfully. Thelos looked down at Odin. His feelings were complicated. He had clearly felt Odin's jealous gaze earlier. Since arriving in this world, he had often wondered how to coexist with Odin. Honestly, he had wished Odin had never drunk from the well of wisdom and stayed as the bumbling younger brother who followed behind him. But fate's wheel turned on. The ever-growing Odin would never be satisfied as someone else's shadow. And now came the problem. After drinking from the well, Odin's IQ rose, but his emotional intelligence tanked. As God King, Thelos couldn't afford to yield on such things. This wasn't some Confucian monarchy. There was no emphasis on filial piety. This was the savage Viking pantheon, the strongest ruled. The chief bedded the most beautiful goddesses and claimed the brightest spoils. If Thelos yielded, people wouldn't see humility. They'd see weakness, cowardice. He couldn't give an inch. Odin knew this, yet still let his ambition fester. In that case, he only had himself to blame. Looking at Odin, Thelos put on a perfectly executed expression of regret. Ah, my brother, I can feel that you, too, care deeply for Freya. Odin said nothing. If she hadn't offered herself up, I wouldn't have minded letting her be yours. But she made her choice, and to better conquer the Vanir, I altered the plan. I took Freya. I know this hurt you. Oh. The giants and muscle-headed gods were just now catching on. Apparently, there really was something going on. Now they were all ears. Even Odin, standing below the throne, looked awkward. He noticed Thelos had dropped the formal I in favor of a more familiar tone. After all, they were both half-bloods, half god, half giant. Calling each other kin wasn't wrong. Thelos continued. To make up for it, Odin, I will give you an opportunity. An opportunity? Odin's eyes lit up, along with everyone else's ears. Name a reward you feel matches your valor and wisdom. If you can prove yourself worthy, I will grant it. This was both compensation and a deliberate opening. Thelos didn't know if Odin would become the cold, cunning god of the myths. But in times of external threat, it was better to guide than suppress. He was taking a gamble. And for now, it seemed Odin hadn't turned dark yet. But his ambition, it was massive. Your Majesty, Odin declared, I wish to command the next campaign against the Vanir. If I can prove both my strength and strategy, and achieve victories worthy of our tribe's admiration, then once we conquer the Vanir, I ask to be given the right to lead them. Boom. The crowd exploded. Whoa, did he really just say that? I mean, Odin is pretty strong. I definitely can't beat him. Voices of doubt, admiration, surprise, they were everywhere. Thelos, however, simply gave the final word. Agreed. My brother, if you prove yourself, I will remove a few troublesome Vanir, 3 or 5, at most, and the rest shall be yours to rule. It wasn't just Odin who was moved. Even Borsten, their father, nearly shed tears on the spot. Borsten had long seen Odin's potential. If it weren't for Thelose, Odin would undoubtedly have been a worthy god king himself. Having 2 sons that brilliant was its own kind of suffering. But now, Thelose had offered a clear path. He wouldn't give up the throne. But the conquered Vanir, making them a subordinate tribe under Odin's leadership, was a perfectly valid solution. So long as the core remained strong, splitting off a branch was fine. In fact, it was better than a forceful assimilation. With time and effort, the 2 factions could truly merge. This tactic mirrored what Thelose had done after slaying the 2 progenitor frost giants, using marriage and diplomacy to make their remnants his vassals. Same pattern, same playbook, same result, blank. Check out my Patreon for plus 200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. Plus 50 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Plus 5 reviews equals plus 1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 49. Then don't blame me for being ruthless, little brother. Odin was just about to agree when he suddenly heard a few loud-mouthed giants, whispering, at a volume of 120 decibels. Odin, can that kid really do it? Can he beat the Njord? If he can't beat Njord, why would those Slivanir gods accept him? Odin was taken aback. He realized his big brother was truly treating him generously. Such compensation would be considered a tremendous favor anywhere. But in the end, you've got to have real strength to forge iron. If he couldn't convince the others, even if he was handed the Vanir throne, he wouldn't be able to hold it. At this moment, Odin, who still had a sincere heart, felt a wave of shame. What was I even thinking? Big brother can claim the most beautiful goddess because he's strong enough. I haven't even proven my own valor. What right do I have to demand the most beautiful goddess? Odin straightened up and solemnly slapped his chest with his right hand, declaring, "Thank you, your majesty, for your trust. I, Odin, swear that within 1 year I will conquer the Vanir and complete the subjugation of their clan." 1 year. He actually needs a whole year. The giant Tiaz muttered. Seeing isn't always believing. Everyone had just watched Thelose casually kill Njord 3 times and now thought this Vanir king was no big deal. And yet Odin was saying it would take a year. Everyone immediately felt Odin was not up to the task. Other giants nodded one after another, and many of the Aesir gods either frowned or nodded in agreement. Odin cursed in his heart. Big mouth. Thelose was pleased. Well done. Odin quickly changed his tune. Half a year? No, I only need 3 months. Good. Thelose clapped decisively. Then 3 months it is. Within the Aesir clan, aside from me, Bor, Bestla, and the goddesses, you have full authority to deploy everyone else. If anyone cowers from battle, you have my leave to execute them. Odin was instantly full of confidence. This Vanir kingship, I, Odin, will have it for sure. Thank you, your majesty. There was an uproar among the Aesir. Honestly, if Thelose had gone back on his word just now, considering the recent victory, no one would have said anything. You're the god king with the biggest fists, whatever you say goes. At most, people would grumble quietly later. But not only did Thelose openly admit fault, he even offered a compensation plan beyond imagination. That made it hard to tell if he was a wise king, or just using the opportunity to cultivate his own brother. Either way, this was both the God King's family matter and a chance for other giants and Aesir gods to rise. Under the God King's rule, Thors and his children occupied the entire second tier of power. As long as they were around, gods and giants without blood ties had no chance to rise. In contrast, Odin only had his son Vali, and perhaps Loki and his brothers as hangers-on, far from enough to rule a god clan. So what Thelose did was not only giving benefits to his brother, but also sharing benefits with the rest of the gods and giants. This also showed off the Aesir's proud tradition of martial virtue. If you can fight, you get to rise. If not, get lost. When Odin declared the 3-month deadline, the gods and giants finally smiled in satisfaction. Yeah, that's more like it. Odin, we're counting on you. The giants' booming voices echoed throughout the Hall of Joy. The gods nodded at Odin as well. In that moment, all of Odin's frustrations vanished, and his heart was filled with gratitude toward his big brother. He followed up on the moment. Since His Majesty is giving me such a once-in-a-millennium opportunity, I shouldn't be tied down by worldly possessions. I'll give up my share of the spoils and let the other meritorious ones have it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The gods and giants naturally cheered. According to merit, Thor was given Nord's eldest daughter, Radwig, while Tyr received the younger daughter, Krupver, as a servant. The rest of the contributors all received appropriate rewards. With the spoils distributed, the atmosphere in the Hall of Joy reached a new peak. The dwarf musicians played their instruments with vigor. Beautiful light elves flew back and forth through the air, offering wine and food to the gods and giants. In the center of the hall, several Vanir goddesses danced gracefully to the music. Seeing this, Bor and his wife were extremely pleased. Passing the throne to Thalos was the wisest decision of my life. Wasn't it, my dear? An excited Bestla plopped herself down. Luckily, Bor reacted quickly and instantly enlarged himself, otherwise, he feared he'd be crushed to death. With Bestla perched on his back, Bor strolled off to the inner hall. Thalos glanced at the scene and for once felt a little shy. He too carried Freya off to the inner hall. Gulveig and the Valkyries trailing behind him hurried to follow in quick, delicate steps. With the God King around, everyone held back. Once Thalos left, the Hall of Joy hit its climax. Many of the victors eagerly began enjoying their spoils right then and there. Peeking through the not yet closed palace doors at what was happening inside, Freya felt another wave of gratitude toward Thalos. At that moment, Thalos was surprised to find Odin and Loki waiting for him, along with Billy. "What's the matter, my dear brother?" Odin let out a long breath and smiled sincerely. "Brother, I was so afraid you were going to call me your foolish little brother again." "No, you're still that foolish little brother." Best actor Thalos curled the corners of his lips. "You did well this time. Thank you for the praise." Odin deliberately avoided looking at the goddess resting on his brother's shoulder, and carefully said, "Thank you for your support, big brother. I'll make this battle against the Vanir look beautiful." Thalos said seriously. "Nord's power is not simple. You were still too hasty this time. If you had held to the 1-year deadline, I could have easily taken care of him for you." As Thalos finished speaking, he clearly felt the goddess on his shoulder tremble slightly, while Gulveig behind him began breathing heavily, her eyes glowing with fervent devotion. One in sorrow, the other in fanatical faith. Odin's reaction was the most interesting. He showed a clearly conflicted expression, then made no effort to hide his ambition. "Brother, I think I can do it. If I have to rely on your strength, then I'm not worthy to be king of the Vanir." "Foolish little brother, those are your own words." Loki, ever the troublemaker, dug a huge hole for Odin and cheerfully said, "If you're so useless, Odin, why not just come with me to guard Jotunheim?" Odin froze for a moment, then, not wanting to lose face, pounded his chest and vowed, "If I can't defeat Njord in 3 months, I'll go guard Jotunheim for the Aesir." Thalos very nearly rolled his eyes. He was beginning to understand why the Edda practically screamed one thing between every line: "It's all Loki's damn fault." Whenever the Aesir had no way out, it was always Loki who came up with the plans. The brilliant schemes were his. The terrible ideas were his too. Loki, with his divine and demonic dual nature, could lead the Aesir to paradise, or drag them straight to hell. In the Prose Edda, Njord actually survived Ragnarok and became the new leader of both tribes, turning around and getting the last of Odin's sons killed. If Njord, sitting on home turf, were really so easy to deal with, he wouldn't have fought the Aesir for years, both sides suffering heavy losses and being forced into a truce. And yet when your own people, like Loki, dig a pit, you, Odin, actually jump right in. Foolish little brother, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Blank. Check out my Patreon for +200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. +50 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. +5 reviews equals +1 extra chapter. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 50. Isn't a 50 to 50 chance still a chance? Thalos followed up smoothly. "Odin. You know that we Aesir revere strength above all. I'm the strongest, so naturally, I deserve the best goddess, the most luxurious palace, and the finest spoils. If you can win the Vanir over by force, that's ideal. If you can't, then I'll have no choice but to annihilate the Vanir and send Billy to replace you as chieftain, to declare our dominance over the Vanir." "Understood." Odin slapped his chest firmly and answered without hesitation, "Understood." This was a high-stakes gamble, with the God King's authority as the wager. If he won, he'd be crowned king in a single step. If he lost, he'd be sent packing to some backwater. Odin gazed at the tall figure of his elder brother Thalos with boundless resolve in his heart. If Big Brother could do it, so can I. That night, during the latter half's private revelry, Freya's head swung back and forth non-stop, her long wavy red hair rippling like a jellyfish, trembling with each movement. Her head and waist bent backward to the extreme, her seductive voice cried out until it cracked and broke. Immediately after, Gulveig followed suit, to the point that Frigg was urgently summoned to the palace. That night, the Hall of Joy truly lived up to its name. As the saying goes, laughing now doesn't mean you'll laugh last. Smiles don't disappear, they just move from one god's face to another's. The next day, those who partied all night couldn't even get out of bed. That forced Odin, who had planned to strike the Vanir while the iron was hot, to abandon his plan. On the third day, Odin rallied nearly all the Aesir's elite forces to prepare for the offensive. Tholos kept his word, magnanimously allowing Odin full freedom to pick his troops. Bor, Bestla, and Tholos himself were off limits. If they moved, it would be tantamount to the God King personally leading the war. The Valkyries Odin felt embarrassed to take. In the end, Odin left behind Heimdall and a bunch of useless gods like those of wine, and aside from the goddesses, he essentially took every noteworthy warrior of the Aesir. That day, the horns sounded long and loud, golden helms and armor glittered everywhere, and the air was heavy with a killing aura. From mortal armies to the towering giants, every soldier was armed to the teeth. The massive army filled the enormous plaza in front of the Bifrost, wide enough for 100 giants to stand shoulder to shoulder. Thor the thunder god, Loki the trickster, Tyr the god of war, Balder the god of light, Vali the god of vengeance, Vidar the god of the forest, Ullr the god of archery, plus a host of giants, Odin had brought out the big guns. The scale of the army made giants like Tiaz look down on him a bit. His Majesty Tholos didn't need half these people to smack down that Njord guy, big-mouthed Tiaz said, earning nods of agreement from several giants. From atop the towering golden command platform, Odin heard them and a vein bulged on his forehead. He endured it. Today marked the start of his legendary journey. He would shut the mouths of gods and giants alike with undeniable merit in battle. Odin turned to glance back toward the Golden Palace. His beloved big brother truly honored his promise, staying out of the deployment ceremony and leaving the stage entirely to him. Odin was deeply grateful, aside from one small blemish. He saw Freya and Frigg leaning against his brother on the terrace, with Bor and Bestla seated beside them. Perhaps that would always be a source of pain for him. Composing himself, Odin raised his divine spear, Gingnir, and declared boldly, full advance. Let us utterly conquer the Vanir, who dared defy the dignity of the Aesir. The divine spear resonated with Odin's will, blazing brilliantly at its tip. Below the platform, the gods, giants, and mortal soldiers roared in unison, Aesir, invincible. Their ambition was sky high. They fancied themselves capable of flattening mountains and filling seas, nothing could stand in their way. Amid the stirring war horns, they marched in relatively neat ranks toward the Bifrost. It was a golden tide composed of gods, surging from the golden palace toward the enemy. Countless mortal elites in golden armor gleamed in the morning sun, their full helmets adorned with bright red plumes that rippled like waves in unison. Bestla was both excited and nervous. My son, do you think Odin will win? Tholos replied mildly, if it were me, I'd definitely win. As for Odin, odds aren't bad. Isn't a 50-50 shot a decent chance? Bor, proud of his eldest son's confidence, found it perfectly natural. He also sensed his second son Odin's ambition. That his eldest could give the second such an opportunity was truly rare. Frigg, intentionally or not, added a jab. With an army like that, even a dog tied to the commander's seat could win. Tholos. Theoretically, the Vanir had just lost, their troops were depleted, gods heavily wounded, arms and armor in short supply. The Aesir had just won, with plenty of soldiers and high morale, fully equipped and eager for battle. By all accounts, this should be a sure win for the Aesir. But, as the saying goes, everything before a but is basically nonsense. Njord, after getting his ass kicked by Tholos 3 times in a row, had 3 full days to prepare. Would he do nothing? On that little island of Vanaheim, the skies buzzed with a sudden hum, and a dazzling rainbow glow burst forth. When countless Aesir gods and mortal soldiers surged forth from the rainbow light, the poor Vanir barely had time to activate the Sea Temple's protective shield. Odin played it safe. He split the army into 4 groups, descending from the Bifrost onto the Sea Temple from the east, west, south, and north. The gods and soldiers were deployed with intention, strongest on the east, weakest on the west. This was to exploit the shield's structural weakness. Uneven attacks could break it faster. What Odin didn't expect was that just after the airborne landings were completed, the sea behind them suddenly surged up with waves 30 to 40 meters high. If it had been a kilometer-tall world-ending wave, Odin would have been less afraid. If the Vanir threw everything into a counterattack, he could just retreat back through the Bifrost to wait it out. 100-meter wave, he could grit his teeth and endure. But these, small, sub-30-meter waves. That meant Njord could use them as regular attacks. Unlike the illusory waves from their fight in Asgard, these waves were completely real. And don't underestimate them, 30-meter waves could easily sink a 10,000-ton warship. HMPH. Odin slammed Gungnir into the ground, clapped his hands together with a loud smack. VMMM. With a strange hum, a massive polar storm spread out from Odin's feet. This was a crossroads of fate. In this life, since the Lows had already claimed the divine authorities of sky, war, and death, Odin had to choose alternative domains. One of his domains now was winter. As a descendant of the primordial frost giant Ymir, Odin had a profound grasp of cold. Tangible ice element mana surged from the seams of his armor, pure divine energy manifesting as dazzling white. The mist-like aura coiled around his hands. Then, in the next moment, a complex tri-layered magic formation locked into place over Odin's left forearm, directing the power outward toward the outer edges of the attack formation. Blank. Check out my Patreon for +200 additional chapters in all my fanfics. Only $5 per novel or $15 for all. www.patreon.com/mutter closing square bracket. +50 power stones equals +1 extra chapter. +5 reviews equals +1 extra chapter.